And we are live. We're ready for the finale of the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. Alexandra, so excited to be back with you. We had a day off. What'd you do yesterday? Did you get some rest?
I did get some rest. I actually took a nap at around 7 p.m. and I woke up at 6 a.m. this morning. So whatever sleep debt I had, I certainly catched up on. Chat is going nuts. Robert, are you wearing a dress shirt today?
You know, I took a lot of heat because for some reason there were certain people out there who weren't a fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle t-shirt look. I thought I was just in the groove, but here I am today going with the dress shirt. It's probably the only day I'll do it ever, but it's
Oh
possible.
man.
Anything
If
is
we take any
possible.
breaks, I think I'm gonna have to change and put on a dress shirt as well.
No,
You're making me look bad,
no,
Robert.
no, no,
I
no.
didn't get the memo here.
That's not possible. But you know, just sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Of course. And today we are going to have a super exciting match, the first of the set of three mini matches between Hikaru Nakamura and Daniel Dubov. I was looking at their head to head, and in rapid games, they have played 10 games to this date. Hikaru has won four of them, Dubov has won one of them, and they've had four draws.
Okay. Well, Hikaru did say he has a lot of experience playing online as well against Daniil Dubov. So these two know how they match up against each other. It's a little bit different because typically when you play other people online, it's in blitz chess, and we're getting the rapid chess here with the 15 minutes plus a 10-second increment. So it does give both players more time.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I mean, Hikaru will be the favorite going into the matches, but as we heard, he was, very level-headed about it. He knows that Dubov is extremely tricky. Anything can happen. So we'll see how the games go. Do you want to pull up the player card so we show Dubov's background as well for those of the audience who are not familiar with him yet?
Do I want to do that?
Will you do it?
I'll think about it. I'll think about it. Um, and no, of course I'll do that. Give me a second.
Um,
And
okay, chat, you guys need to relax a little bit.
what
This
happened?
is chess, but if you guys want to follow Robert on his Instagram, I'm gonna call it out and he's gonna get all embarrassed.
Oh
Um,
no.
yes,
Oh no, don't
Robert,
do
are you
it.
guys ready?
Don't do
It's
it.
R Hess 91.
Don't do
R
it.
Hess 91. We're
Don't do it.
currently at 945 followers. So let's see which ones of you guys are actually loyal Hess
Oh
fans.
no. I don't ever post on Instagram. Why are you doing this to
They
me?
can see all of the food you eat.
Well, that was a long time ago. They can't see the food I currently am eating.
Oh,
Now I feel. Don't do that to me.
I'm sorry, Robert. Just a mild poke there. That's all.
Well, I see the games are going live, and we have Dubov with the white pieces and making the first move with d4. Let me pull up the other. Oh, I have everything under control. Look at me. I feel prepared. I was a little,
You are killing it, Robert.
I was, a,
Robert,
I was a little nervous. I'm out of my element because wearing the dress shirt really is just. It's not totally me, but today it has to be.
no, the dress shirt is nice. We're actually wearing somewhat similar tones of shirt, so it actually looks like we're matching. It's just that you one-upped. But you know what? Let's focus on the chess. So we have a Queen's Gambit decline modern variation from Hikaru,
Right.
and this is something that Hikaru has a lot of experience playing, but so does Dubov. It's pretty highly theoretical. A lot of people might notice that the pawn on c4 looks like it's hanging. Robert, what's going to happen if Hikaru ever decides to take that pawn?
Yeah, if Hikaru takes that pawn, Dubov is going to try to push his pawn to e4 because the pawn on d5 currently makes that move less enticing. As you want to play e4, but you maybe don't want to allow your opponent to start trading pieces in the center, especially if white is the one who's trying to claim that he has more space in the position. When you have more space, you tend to want to leave pieces on the board because your opponent's pieces step on each other's toes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So by being able to get a free pawn, he's also giving his opponent some counterplay there. So instead, maybe he'll just continue developing his pieces. A move like b6 here might come to mind, so he can put his bishop on b7. I think he has to be a little bit careful because then c takes d5, e takes d5. And if he puts his bishop on b7, he's actually going to be blocked by one of his own pawns. So another idea he has in this position is to push c5, usually as early as possible, to start challenging the center, and we see that that's what he goes for. I
Yeah.
was about to call it right before he played it, but I missed it.
No, I believe in you for sure. And I heard a little yay, so I know that that means there was a sub. But I'm getting used to it now, you know? Just, we're on Hikaru's channel. We're very appreciative of that. And Hikaru's just blowing up, so he's getting lots of subs. And I'm just going to get used to it and not be rattled anymore.
That sounds great. So we look here and we got the pawns in a square. They're all right next to each other. And I think that these positions can always be intimidating because it seems like you have so many captures to calculate here. So when you look at this, how do you start evaluating which pawn to take? So we see he played d takes c5, which looks a little bit counterintuitive because you're trading one of your center pawns for a pawn that's on the side.
Yeah, it does do that. It also opens up the D file for the white rook, and that's actually probably why Hikaru decided to take on c4 instead of taking back on c5. That was an option. But if Hikaru had taken back on c5, you'll note there's now a pin on this knight on f6, behind is queen on d8, and if white were to castle queenside, we'll just show that on the board, there's a pin on this d5 pawn, as there are multiple pins in the position, on the knight on f6, on the pawn on d5, and it's just starting to look a little bit uncomfortable for Hikaru, which is why, instead, he said, I'm going to take on c4, and you cannot castle through check. So you can play rook d1 still, but you probably want to get your king out of the center.
Right, and e3 is also opening up the bishop on f1 to capture on c4 here. So as soon as white's able to do that, he'll be able to castle away. Hikaru, of course, can also capture back on c5 with his bishop, but if he does that, he will leave his knight pinned. So another option that Hikaru can go for is moving his queen somewhere like c7 out of the pin and also threatening c5 with his queen. Dubov cannot protect that pawn back with a move like b4, supporting it with another pawn because then you can get rid of the pawn on b4 by capturing en passant.
Yep, and thank you so much there for the raid, Grandmaster Gory and Sam Copeland, both of you with the raid, so appreciate that a lot. Love that chess is becoming so popular, and these are two chess streamers specifically, but we're appreciative of them as well, of course. You know, everybody who's streaming chess, growing the game, thank you so much.
All right, knight a6 played instead, so we're putting a knight on the rim here, except it does have a plan, so it's not so bad. Usually you want to put your knights more towards the center because they have more possible squares they can go to. But the knight on a6 is putting pressure on c5, and if he ever takes with his knight on c5, then he is bringing his knight more towards the center. Dubov can't really stop it, so he decides to just capture the pawn. He is now available to castle. He can bring his rooks on the d file in the future, and now Hikaru can continue developing as well. I just wonder what's the best way, and should he be afraid of b4, kicking his knight back here?
Yes, b4 is a move that you have to keep in mind because it's very easy to make a move like bishop to d7, but then you look at this knight on c5, and you're like, wait, what are the safe squares for it? e4? No, that's under white's control. And all the other squares are occupied by black's pieces except for knight to a6, in which case there may be a time where white just snaps that knight off, gives black a worse pawn structure. So b4 certainly is an idea that black will have to keep an eye on.
And Hikaru responded with a6, which makes me think that he is going for a similar plan in the sense of he wants to push b5 with a tempo, attacking the bishop, and then he'll be able to develop his bishop on b7. But first, he has to protect his queen, and he decides to go queen e8, which looks like a very passive square. He's blocking his rook from coming to e8. Why couldn't have he played queen c7?
Could have played queen c7, but he probably didn't want to allow bishop g3 with a tempo. Because the bishop on h4, well, it does attack the knight on f6. It's probably stronger on the other diagonal where it's got a longer range. It also attacks important squares like d6, and of course the queen on c7 already would be under threat. Not to mention that with pieces lining up on each other on the c file, you always have to be careful about what happens when some of them move out the way if there are any sort of discoveries.
Yeah, that's a great point here. And the time situation is pretty even. Both players have been making the moves pretty quickly. Do you think we're still in theory for both black and white here?
Yeah, I would imagine that the players feeling relatively at home. It seems like Dubov is playing a little more quickly, and he's the one who has chosen, how this game would go down. But Hikaru also has plenty of time. It's like 13 minutes in this position where it's the issue, I would say, for both sides, and particularly for black, is there are no clear-cut plans. For white, I sort of see obvious moves, at least responsive moves. Bishop to d7 can be met by knight to e5, where I'm just putting pressure on your bishop. So your idea from earlier, b5, certainly has to be considered here, but is putting the bishop on b7 good? It does get it on a nice looking diagonal, but maybe it also weakens some squares on the queen side, so b5 is like a very committal choice.
Absolutely a committal choice here. And another question that's a little bit more broad, and not for this question specifically, but when Hikaru was playing against Magnus, he was talking about how when he starts off with the black pieces, if he gets a draw in the first game, he's pretty happy with it because then he has white going forward 2 out of 3 games. Do you think he has a similar strategy, or that was more just for Magnus?
Sorry, I heard text to speech and I was caught off guard. I've never
No
heard that
worries.
in my ear before. I have, of course, seen that.
Let me give you a TLDR then. I was going to ask if you think Hikaru would be happy with a draw with the black pieces starting off in this mini match.
Yes, certainly. Because while he is the higher rated of the two players, Daniil Dubov is a former World Rapid champion and has been excellent throughout the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. I mean, he beat Ding Liren in 2 straight matches, and he played impressively in both. And so I think that Hikaru, with the black pieces, he's just trying to find a way to neutralize any of White's initiative, and then if he can get winning chances, he'll of course go for them.
Got it. And I'm getting note from Chespe, one of Hikaru's mods, that she turned off TTS. So now you'll be able to not have that in your ear.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Chespe.
Well, I kind of liked it. It was sort of enjoyable. It just caught me off guard the first time. I felt like it was something that I would get used to, where, you know, I have to roll with the punches. I have to get in the flow of things. But I appreciate, of course, everything that Chespe does.
Okay, well, Queen B2 just played by Dubov, moving the queen a second time already, but the idea here is that he's trying to get his queen off the c-file because he's anticipating that at some point Hikaru will make a move like rook c8. It's also helping support b5 if he ever wants it, protecting the b-pawn as well, which was attacked from the bishop. So a lot of purposes being completed with that move there.
And what do you think about this move queen to b2, right? Like, it protects the pawn on b4, but as a d4 player yourself, don't you often want the queen on c2 for the most part? Because the queen on c2 at least aims the e4 square, which allows either white to play e4 yourself or stops a black knight from getting into e4.
That's true, but when the file has been opened up like it has here and we don't have any c-pawn, a move like rook c8 would be pretty annoying because then black's knights can go to d5 and start putting pressure on the pinned piece because the queen remains on the open file. So I can imagine that that's why he decided to play b2 here. And looking at the clocks, we see that Hikaru is 2 minutes less than Dubov. That's not a huge time disadvantage. He's sitting a little bit here, so I'm trying to think what his options are. Now that the queen moved away, it's no longer protecting the e4 square, so Hikaru could see this as an opportunity to put his knight on the center on e4 and offer up some trades, especially if he's pretty happy with a draw. Then simplifying a little bit and trying to force for a win with the white wouldn't be the worst strategy. Instead, he puts his rook on c8, another very intuitive move, just bringing it to the open file here. No direct threats, but improving the position of his pieces.
Well, I do see on my end, I do see a tricky threat that you have to keep an eye on. And one is this move, rook takes c3. Because the reason I'm looking at that is we're talking about knight e4, and I'm trying to make these ideas work together. I note that this bishop on h4 has no defender. So if I can move my knight out of the way and attack something, that bishop might fall. So if you just play a3 and you're not on the lookout, rook takes c3, queen takes c3, in comes knight to d5, hitting your queen on c3 and opening up an attack on your bishop on h4.
Oh, that is a tricky tactic. So maybe Dubov should just move his bishop from h4. It's not doing much anymore. He could just retreat it to g3, and that way he won't have to worry about any of these tactics in the future, as well as put his bishop on a better diagonal where he has control over more squares.
Yeah, I'd like to move bishop g3. It just is safeguarding your position, making sure that you don't have to even worry about tactics. Rook ac1 is probably good as well, because now if the rook were to take on c3, your rook on c1 would protect the square. And so just to show that variation, rook c1, rook takes c3, rook takes c3. Now if you try the same thing with knight d5, I'm just going to take your bishop, because unlike when the queen was on c3, my bishop can still move just because a more valuable piece is immediately under attack, and we can get a series of trades that should favor white.
So a series of trades should favor white here. Is that because white's pieces are more active, or because white has more space?
Well, I think that specifically in that particular variation, white would get to the queen to c7, for instance. Like after knight takes c3, you can even play queen takes c3 and get your queen to c7. And it's the space that comes with the open file, and your rook's already on d1. You're sort of just a little bit ahead in development and in seeking the initiative.
All right. Well, we still see Dubov sitting here for a little bit. So other than bishop g6, I wonder if he has any other options that he can consider as well. Obviously must be the case, or he would have moved it immediately. Another move that is very tempting is b5, unless you still have that trick with rook takes c3, queen takes c3, and knight e4, which I guess you do still have. So
I drew arrows for both sides for b5 because it's very interesting. It feels like at certain moments, white will want to play b5, and in certain moments, black will want to play b5. And I know there's the tactic on c3, but we'll table that for a second. But Alex, let me ask you. Let me turn this around here. As if you look at this from the black side, when do you want to play a move like b5? Because it does sort of invite my knight from d4 over to a5 in certain variations, or maybe gives me the c5 square. So how do you determine when a committal pawn move should be made?
when should a committal pawn move be made? Well, usually when you have your pieces on the best squares for the pawn move to be made, or if you're not going to have the opportunity to make that move in the future. So, if Hikaru were to play something like b5 and take away that square from you, then that is something that you're going to have to consider, because maybe you do it now or never.
Right. And I think for black, it's actually a particularly risky decision, because as soon as b5 happens, I'm immediately looking at pawn a4 for white, where my rook on a1 not doing so much just yet, and there it is, b5 for Dubov. So he must be looking at this rook takes c3 stuff and saying, now that my pawn's on b5, I can actually make this work for me, where the tactics earlier with rook takes c3 and knight to d5 favored black. I guess with this pawn on a6 under attack, that these lines are not quite as good for black as those other lines, where you can even start with b takes a6 or after queen takes c3. I guess knight d5 still happens. So there has to be a move order thing going on here, where this pawn on a6 is captured at the end once you capture my bishop on h4.
So on the line that I see you're showing on the board, you're suggesting queen takes c3 right away. Can we not grab the knight on f6 first?
I'm giving you a thumbs up there. I gave you a thumbs up. You didn't see it, but I was like, yeah,
okay.
There you go.
There we go. Thanks, Robert.
So bishop takes f6 is a good intermediate move, right? The point is that Alexandra is not just taking a knight back in return for the knight that I just gave up, but you finish your thought process here, because I don't want to speak for you.
Well, if black recaptures the knight, then we're going to be able to take the rook, and we should be pretty winning here. And if the rook moves away, let's say even it goes back to c8, then I was going to say we can take the bishop on e7, but potentially we can even take on g7 with discovery checks. But okay, just to go for the safe calculation that works, if we take the bishop on e7, queen takes, then we can take the pawn on a6, and we're already up a pawn. We have a passed pawn, and this position looks quite good for white.
It looks excellent. So, I was kind of setting you up a little bit just because...
Yeah, you definitely were. Thanks for throwing that over, Robert.
Well, I wasn't just throwing it over because I found the tactic, quote-unquote, easy to find. I actually found it easy to miss. Because when somebody, if we go back to the live board, if somebody were to play rook takes c3, our instinct is either to take back or to take the pawn a6, which we just put under attack. And maybe taking on a6 would have been good, but I do think that sometimes we just forget about bishop takes f6, that intermediate move on the other side of the board.
Absolutely. So that's why Hikaru did not take on c3. He instead played a5, closing up the queen side a little bit, keeping the position solid. So Dubov moves his knight to a4. He's getting rid of any tactics he has to worry about with the knight on c3. He's putting pressure on b6. Of course, the knight on d7 is still protecting the pawn there, so it's a bit of a funky looking move, because you would think he wants to put his pawn on a4 as well.
Yeah, it is funny, because you're saying pawn on a4 protecting the pawn on b5 looks right, but there are moments where you don't want to push your pawn too soon, because the knight on a4 is stronger as it puts pressure on b6. So there must be some variations where Dubov will think about taking this knight on f6 if the knight on d7 can't take back, because if the knight on d7 were to move, then this pawn on b6 becomes a real problem. So that's why I'm guessing went b5, went knight a4, But I don't know. I mean, if you give white a free move, Alexandra, what would you do?
If I had a free move here as white, okay, well, an easy move would be just bringing my rook over to c1 because I don't see a direct threat right now. Bishop takes f6 would be tempting if black took with the knight and stopped protecting the b6 pawn, but I don't see that happening. So maybe another idea here would be, can we move the knight from d4 and add some pressure? I don't think so.
Well, I want to put it to c6. That's where I'm trying to get this knight to go. And I know immediately it looks like it sacrifices a pawn, but sometimes it's worth giving up a pawn if you get the bishop pair and then new diagonals to work with. So I am looking over there.
So you do like knight c6 if it was white's turn to move right now?
I think that's definitely a good consideration, because even if you don't win your pawn back right away, which I do think you will, and knight d5 was played by Hikaru just to settle things down. But if you play king h8, just a random move, knight c6, if you take me and take back on c6, I have this move bishop b5, where now I'm hitting your rook, pinning your knight on d7, to your queen on e8. Like, things are starting to become really dangerous for black, and I don't really see a way to prevent my next move, knight takes b6, as your knight on d7 is pinned.
Yeah, you're right. It is a really annoying move. So instead, Hikaru goes for d5, which attacks the bishop on h4, offers it for a trade. And if the bishops do trade off, then at least he gets his queen on e7. So your plan with eventually, knight c6, then bishop b5 isn't going to be as dangerous because at least the queen and knight aren't pinned.
That's right. And this knight on d5, very useful in defending the pawn on b6 another time. So I'm totally with you that this knight d5 move, it kind of does everything that Hikaru wants. It tries to trade pieces in a position where he has less space, and that leaves his remaining pieces with more space. They're not stepping on each other's toes. And a clear example of that is this knight on d7. It wants to move up, and it can go to f6 in the future, which it couldn't do when there was already a knight on f6. It can also now go to e5 or to c5 now that the knight on d5 protects the b6 square. So you're freeing up your knight on d7, you are advancing your knight to d5, and you're like saying, please play e4. I mean, if you play e4 for white, this knight immediately goes into the f4 square, and then black is the one with a huge initiative and a potential attack.
Right, so white can just slow play this a little bit. I still really like rook ac1. It's a piece that needs to be developed still for white, and it does help put extra pressure on c6. However, I don't know if white is interested in a rook trade here.
Well, you're asking a good, sort of hinting at a good question. What trades do we want to see happen? And does white want to trade one pair of rooks, no pair of rooks, both pairs of rooks? And Hikaru says, well, I'm not going to wait and see what happens. I'm going to just trade knights. And this is another moment where the intermezzo is a theme. Because if I say, wait a second, your knight on d7 was protecting this pawn on b6. So why don't I take on d5 and remove your defender, the b6 pawn, and take a next move? Well, the answer is after bishop takes d5, our knights are attacking each other, and you see that evaluation bar just go down, because I can just go knight takes e4 here, a4, excuse me, and attack your queen. I can win your bishop back next move, and I'm probably just winning material with knight to c3, forking your rook and your bishop. So black is the one that just very quickly, actually you can't even protect, you would only be able to quote-unquote protect your bishop by attacking my knight, but if you attack my knight, I move my knight back, attacking your queen, and picking up your bishop next. So watch out for those intermediate moves.
And the other annoying thing about this knight move is that if you trade off, which just happened in the game, then you're actually helping activate Hikaru's rook. He's putting it on c5, which he wants to do anyway, because now his other rook has space to go to c8 and double up on the open file here. So I'm actually starting to prefer Hikaru's position here, because now his plans are seeming a little bit more intuitive. Although I imagine that after a move like a4, it's still pretty solid for both sides, but he will have to protect b5 with another pawn at some point.
Yeah, I am starting to prefer Hikaru's position, that's for sure. And I see the evaluation bar, it's about even at this point, saying the position should be level. But I think that this is a moment where it's, in some ways, not distracting is not the right word, but it's confusing to see this, because black is about to play rook c8, take control of the c file, so perhaps white has to play rook c1 first. And one of the tough questions that you must ask yourself is, do I need to take this knight on d5 at some point? And if I do that, what happens when I have a bishop versus a knight dynamic? Sometimes a knight can outclass a bishop if there is an outpost for the knight, or some pawn I can start piling up pressure on, or maybe an attack with the knight and the queen. But here that doesn't look to be the case. However, this knight on d5 is really annoying, potentially coming to c3 or to b4, depending on what white does. So I think that there is a tough choice ahead here for Dubov.
Yeah, and even if he does bring his rooks to trade off, I guess that asks another question. If he were to play, let's say, okay, he decided not to, because I think the issue with trading rooks off would be that eventually Hikaru's queen would end up on c5, and he just wouldn't be able to win the open file from Hikaru. So instead, it seems like he's going for something a little bit more on the wild side because his position is so uncomfortable. So he's playing knight c6. He is trying to trade off Hikaru's bishop. Like you said, we prefer to have the bishops over the knights generally in these kinds of positions. And we see the trade here. Hikaru is likely about to grab that extra pawn. He can't grab it right away, though, because his rook is busy defending the knight on d5. So that knight is defended twice by the pawn on e6 and the rook on c5. It's also attacked twice here. And if Dubov is ever going to take it, he's going to create a weak pawn for Hikaru. Do you think that Dubov is trying to sense that, okay, if we go into one of these endgames, and even if Hikaru is up an extra pawn on the queen side, I should still be able to hold it, and that seems better than having to try to play this uncomfortable position?
I don't know. Right now, it's looking tough for Dubov, especially considering he's down the clock. Queen c7 was a really nice move by Hikaru. As you said, you could have taken on c6, but that would just give white the pawn right back on the d5 square. As I'll show that one more time. After the trade on d5, rook takes d5. Maybe black is slightly better, and the engine seems to think so because of the pawns being on the outside. The 2-on-1 on the queen side is nice for black. But why just give up that pawn so easily on d5? And after queen to c7, the idea is now I'm protecting the pawn on b6. I'm threatening to take on c6 with my queen. And once my queen's on c6, d5 is actually protected another time. So white may play rook a to b1, or want to play rook a to b1, I should say. But then rook to b8 simply protects the pawn on b6. And I'm going to take on c6 next move. Not to mention knight c3 at some moment. Perhaps not now, but that is a scary looking tactic available to black if you're not careful with a fork.
Yeah, this position is very, very tricky to play. That's why I like the idea of just getting rid of that knight, because it's the knight in the center. That's where the knight always dreams to be. It also is almost as if it's a knight outpost, because even though you can technically push e4 and kick the knight out, that would be a really bad move because you'd be weakening the pawn. So I think it's one of black's most annoying pieces. I'd love to get it off and then just try to put pressure on the d5 pawn, but it would still be difficult to try to recapture a pawn back. So Dubov is likely going to sit and think in this position. I'm going to just refresh and see where his clock's at.
He went rook a to c1, and he is just over 5 minutes to Hikaru's just under 8 minutes. So Hikaru with a substantial lead here on the clock, and this may be a position with optimal play that white should be holding, but it's so uncomfortable. Like, with the white pieces after 24 moves, you're the one who's about to be down a pawn very likely, and fighting tooth and nail just to hold the balance.
So if you had to predict what's going to happen in this game, I mean, well, what do you think Hikaru's winning chances are? I know, I'm sorry. I love throwing you these questions, Robert. For those of you guys who don't know, Robert did have a sports and stats journal that he ran. I don't know if journal is the right
website,
word.
But
website, yeah. So he's really good at doing these kinds of predictions.
I have a little bit more information, and I'm not just coming up with numbers on the spot. But
yeah, this might actually be counter to what you wanted to do with it. So.
Exactly, but
sorry about that.
I would say that Hikaru's winning chances right now is probably, I would go with 70%. And the reason why I think that feels a little high. Let's go down a little bit to 60%. And the reason why I like his chances more than anything is his lead on the clock. I do think that we're going to get into a position where, it says it's completely equal now, and I'm probably going to have to eat my words. That feels like just me misreading the situation. But if Hikaru is able to keep this extra pawn, any sort of rook endgame that may be theoretically drawn or holdable becomes that much more difficult when you're down 2 minutes on the clock. But now that I'm looking at the position, I still think that black has good chances. So I'm not going to bow down to whatever the engine may be going up and down to. I think that Hikaru has actually quite good chances.
That's right, Robert. Don't bow down to the computer, and we know how you feel about it, so it's always great to have you putting the more controversial opinions on the board here. So rook c1, Dubov is switching over from putting pressure on the d5 pawn to putting pressure on the black queen here. And once the queen moves away, he's also going to be the one controlling the only open file. So that's probably why the engine evaluation doesn't give Hikaru a full pawn up, because his piece activity is worse than white, so it makes it a little bit less than that. G3, Dubov is making some space for his king in the future, not because he thinks he's going to get checkmated, but so that there's no annoying tactics where he has to be careful because otherwise he will be checkmated. And now I like the move queen d4. I know you don't usually want to block pawns with a queen, but you don't have other pieces here, and you're also putting pressure on b6. I'm just trying to think of what Dubov can do to just try and hold black's extra pawns here. Maybe something like get a pawn to a4, a rook on b5, and say, okay, well, let's see you make progress now.
Yeah, that would be actually a really sturdy defense there, as you're not only blockading the b6 pawn, but putting pressure on it. You're attacking the d5 pawn if you get your rook to b5. Of course, that takes a while to organize. You have to play rook b1, move your queen out the way, then play rook b5, and that takes some time that black will be able to compete against it. So d4 is an idea that you have to be on the lookout for, because right now it's an extra pawn on the queen side. These two over here, the b and a pawns against white's a pawn, and this d5 pawn's isolated. It isn't the easiest pawn to defend in certain lines, so playing d4 for black will also encourage some trades, in which case, and look at the evaluation bar. It's going north for Hikaru, and it's just better for black than it was before, even if what Dubov's idea is somehow to trade off pieces and get to a position that he may think is in more theoretical territory.
So queen b5, I wonder why that move is so bad, because I saw your eval bar just be like, whoa, I like Hikaru's position now. And okay, so d4. Yeah, that was going to be my guess. And it's just a pawn trade, so e takes, queen takes, but what it's doing really good for Hikaru, what it's doing very well for Hikaru here is the fact that he had an isolated pawn and he should be able to trade it. What happens if rook d1? I guess you just keep pushing with d3.
Oh yeah, oh that's a problem. That's now went from a sad isolated pawn to a very nice advanced pass pawn.
Uh-oh. And Dubov has 3 minutes on the clock. Also, I just want to say that earlier when I said the math wrong on the clocks, that's because the relay is off for me. So sometimes it gets paused. Chat. Okay. Done defending myself.
I love it. Blame everybody else, Alexandra. Blame everybody else.
But it's true. The clocks were frozen, so I didn't know what it was at. So I was just reading off here.
I know. It happens. That's what happens anytime there's a relay from an organizer. It sometimes happens. But d4, and now Dubov is thinking that's a really bad sign, if you ask me. Like the fact that he was playing very quickly, or sorry, not playing very quickly after a move that was kind of obvious. Like you went rook d8, queen on d6 to play d4. And if you start taking some time after that, that's worrisome. And I think the problem that he's now seeing is after e takes d4, queen takes d4, rook to b1, where you're putting pressure on the b6 pawn. Black has this move rook to d6, and I know you want to go queen e8 check, king h7, and steal a pawn. You're down one pawn. I'm stealing a pawn and going after the black king side, but then comes rook f6, where I attack your queen on f7 and put another attacker on the f2 pawn. And so I give up my f7 pawn to win f2, and as you see the evaluation, it's going crazy in black's favor.
Yeah, that's a really nice line to show there. Instead, Dubov is going to have a really hard time trying to figure something out here.
He is. He's struggling because I think I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, an educated guess, is that he forgot that after queen e8 takes f7 in that line, that the rook on d6 comes to f6. Because you kind of want trading on d4, rook to b1, and if rook to b8, now this rook's in a very passive spot. You're tied down to the b6 pawn, and as you were suggesting earlier, white can play a move like a4, and just try to claim that black's progress will be nearly impossible to orchestrate without some kind of concession here or there. And yes, black is still better up a pawn, but that's probably what his idea was, is to force the rook to b8, but now he realizes it can come up to d6 and defend actively.
Yeah, rook b8 is a much more intuitive move. You're usually used to protecting your pawns from behind instead of from the side, and also moving your rook up is something that maybe he wouldn't have considered because you don't usually like allowing checks there. So it's interesting to see that even for such a top player, he may have missed an idea like that.
Yeah, so rook c6 also a possibility here, hitting the queen and the pawn on b6. But rook c6, now you have to worry about your king safety, because as soon as you start putting all your pieces forward going after a pawn, you have to watch out. Like, what if my queen ends up on e1 and then my rook ends up on d1, and that's a quick attack. So it's not just about the extra pawn. It's also that if you go after that pawn, your king can quickly be in a checkmating net.
And I know it might be too soon to say this, but then do you think that his mistake was just when he played knight c6 earlier on and he gave up the pawn? Maybe he made a mistake way back then in his calculation.
It must be. I mean, it was definitely probably assessment was off at that point, feeling the pressure, feeling like I just need to do something to make the position more clear. And, well, the clarity at this point is definitely in black's favor. And, okay, the rook went up to c6, which attacks the b6 pawn. But as mentioned, Alexander, this king on g1, it could fall victim to a quick attack. Queen e4 already threatens rook d1, trying to checkmate this king. So Hikaru needs to play precisely here, but his advantage is certainly growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know if you see this as well, but I see Dubov under a minute on the clock. So defending this position with your king so vulnerable, with the white squares weak, and having your opponent have a queen that can take advantage of them, it seems extremely unlikely that he'll get off with this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a move here for black. There has to be something precise because the advantage has grown. It's really high now. So rook to d6 is a possibility to trade rooks off, but I feel like there's more. And rook d6 and queen e4 played by Hikaru, I think that's a very good move. As I was mentioning, you're threatening a checkmate idea with rook to d1. But rook to d6 was possible, just trying to trade the pieces. And if you get into a queen endgame up a pawn, your chances of winning are usually pretty high.
Absolutely. So queen e4, he has to retreat his rook then backwards. He just played rook c1. He's holding any checks on the back rank here. And now Hikaru has to continue making progress. And it's actually not that obvious how he's going to do it, because as you mentioned, he does have to be precise. For example, can he play something like queen f3 with the idea of rook d2, or is that going to be a problem if Dubov grabs the b6 pawn?
Yeah, you grab the b6 pawn and your queen comes back to protect on f2.
All right, well, Hikaru's answering the question for us, Robert.
Yeah, he goes for it, and that's queen's b6 looks like, wait, can I just win this pawn and I protect the f2 square? But he's actually going to try to win this a pawn, and if queen takes b6, I think just, as you said, rook to d2, or rook d1 check might even be more forcing, because if you take, we trade rooks, and after king g2, there's queen d5 check, and I'm hitting the a2 pawn, and now I have a clear pass pawn and a queen ending. So Dubov has like no time left. Is that right?
23 seconds is what I see.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, this is just now
Man,
it's Hikaru's
to lose
game.
the first game with the white pieces, that is tough, because you're going to be already in a must-win situation, and you're going to have two blacks.
I feel much better about my. You maybe put a percentage on Hikaru's winning chances there, and I said they were high because of the clock. And this is a position where, all right, it's looking really tough now. Ooh, h4, risky move, because on one hand you're giving your king more space to escape. On the other, you may be allowing some sort of g5, and okay, now if you get g5 and we have to trade on g5, this rook comes to h6 and delivers a checkmate on h1.
Nice. So rook d6 isn't just protecting the b6 pawn, but it's also preparing to get the rook onto the h file with your idea there. King h7, so it seems like he's being careful first. He doesn't want to allow any rook c8 checks. And usually when you are the side with all of the attacking chances and your opponent is just sitting or shuffling like Dubov is doing with his queen, you might as well stop all counterplay before you continue forward with your plan.
Yeah, the queen is just doing nothing back here because Dubov can't even take b6 with his rook here on the d6 square. And actually h5 by Hikaru, you can still play g5 in many lines just to blast open the white king. And with 13 seconds left, he plays rook to e1. Now goes up to, I guess he had 14, it was 24 seconds. But this is just no fun. You can't even leave the first rank with your rook, because then comes rook d1, and I win your queen while checking the king. So Hikaru pushes his a pawn down the board. And know what he's setting up for, Alexander? If this queen ever leaves the b1 square and we trade rooks on d1, I'm going to win your a2 pawn for my b6 pawn. And with my pawn more advanced, that's actually helping me come closer and closer to promoting.
Yeah, that's a really good long-term plan. And we saw that idea with the line you showed earlier, where if we ever trade off the rooks and the king goes to a light square, he's going to get checked on d5, attacking his pawn and his king at the same time. But what if his king tries to stay on dark squares?
It's going to happen. Hikaru's going to play rook d1 here. We're going to see a trade. If the king goes to g2, you just pointed out queen d5 is the check, and that hits the a2 pawn. So your king h2, and then I play queen c2, hitting your a2 pawn and your f2 pawn at the same time.
And there's just no way to defend those both. And a queen and a passed pawn, they work together very well because the queen can protect all of the squares the pawn needs to go to, even if the queen is in front of the pawn. So say the queen were on a1 in that variation, the white queen, well, even if you get your pawn to a3 and your queen to b2, you can kick the queen out of the promoting square. So that's why it's such a lethal combination.
That's a good point. You can show that afterwards, but I think that's really excellent.
Because I think we're going to see a resignation here.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, why we're pretty confident in the resignation is it's easy for black to go a3, move the queen. As long as the queen stays defending this pawn on f7, you're going to be winning this game. The one thing you have to be careful about is if white can somehow timely play g4 and h5 and try to open up your king. But Hikaru actually very smartly starts with queen e6. Queen trade's not possible here because, of course, this a pawn becomes a new queen. And so the queen goes back. And I can play queen. I want to get queen e7. If my queen were on a7 in one move, I would hit f2 and push the pawn. But he kind of gained the tempo there. Moved his queen back. Then now can play a3. Now can play a2. And then once your pawn gets to a2, we'll see Hikaru finish up. h6, g4 now.
I like that Dubov is at least trying to break open the king here. I mean, his best chance here is that he opens up black's king side and he has some kind of perpetual where he's just keeping the king in checks. And that way, you know, Hikaru can't promote. He's too busy defending his king. Of course, Hikaru is not going to allow for that. But it's always good to see that last hope strategy there.
Yeah, you need to break into the black's king position there. And what about just a2? I think a2 just wins because you take my pawn on h5, good for you, I get another queen. And after a2, if you play queen a3, I can just take your pawn on g4. And you have no attack with your queen trying to stop my pawn on the queen side over there.
Right, and if you try something like queen d1 to protect the
queen e5.
square where you promote, then you have queen e5. Right, checking
Nice.
the king, and a1 is coming.
That's a problem.
And we got a resignation, Robert.
So we have resignation, which means Hikaru Nakamura jumps out to a 1-0 lead. And it really was a clean game. Dubov just didn't get the style of position that he's usually comfortable with. It was a positional battle, whereas Dubov has a tactical flair to his games typically. So Hikaru Nakamura showing that his win over Magnus Carlsen isn't the end of his journey. He's ready to move on here and try to take out Daniil Dubov in the finals.
That was a really impressive win by Hikaru. And I'm curious, I mean, we talked about their head-to-head in rapid/blitz games. Do you think there's some kind of psychological factor that makes Dubov a little bit more scared of Hikaru because of their score?
Give me a sec as I just change the pieces to a little classic look.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering what you're going for.
The classic. When I said the classic look, I meant classic.
Oh, the classic one. Okay, I forgot that's what it's called on chess.com. I've been using ICC lately as the piece style, and I really like it. It's nice to switch it occasionally, you know?
I can go to ICC if that's,
Internet Chess Club, which, okay, you guys, we're just going to throw back stories for a while. So before chess.com was popular, there was this desktop app. It was called Internet Chess Club, ICC. It was, honestly, it was super nerdy looking. And Hikaru used to play there under an account called Smallville. And this was before streaming was a thing. And people would follow his games. And even then, you'd have like 800 people watching Hikaru play at like 2 a.m. and just chatting in like this little chat that looks like it was developed by the same people who did Microsoft Paint. Anyway, it was hilarious. Wild times. And that's where, when you grew up playing chess as a kid, you would talk to all your friends on ICC because your parents didn't know there was a chat room.
They did not. And yeah, that was a thing back in the day. You just outed so many kids to their parents. You gave them a trouble. You stayed up past your bedtime. You promised me that you went to sleep early for your test the next day, and it wasn't because of lack of sleep that you failed.
Yeah, it was because you're up talking late on ICC. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why I got so excited about that.
You just, throwbacks. I played the song Memories by Maroon 5 before we started, so I feel like it set the tune and the tone.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Should we go back to that moment where you were talking about how this pawn sacrifice, maybe that was the decision that kind of lost the game for Dubov?
Yeah, let's go there. Because that's when we were wondering if it was a mistake. So I'm also scrolling back to try to find it.
So move 22. Oh, knight c6 was the move that Dubov
Right.
played.
Okay, so let's go back before he played knight c6. And the question is, what if he had just done the normal move here, right? The normal move being rook a c1, bringing the one not developed piece to an open file.
I think it was a good move. Rook a c1, very natural. And you made a point was that if black plays rook f to c8 to sort of reinforce the c file, control the c5 square, if white tries to trade off all the rooks, black can take with the queen on c5, and that way rook c1 no longer possible, as black is the one controlling the file.
Right, and I mean, I'm guessing this was a position he was uncomfortable with, but it's weird to me that he evaluated this position as being worse than the one where he's down a pawn.
I get the feeling that he just intuitively felt that there is compensation here, because rook takes e6 we know doesn't work because the bishop takes d5 and you get the pawn back, and so queen c7 was a really nice move by Hikaru, just making sure that everything was defended. b6 gets another defender. I could take on c6 with my queen, which defends the knight on d5 or what may become a pawn on d5. So queen c7 was a nice first resource, and then I don't know, I just have this feeling where Dubov, he was going with this, there must be something. He didn't actually calculate through that he was getting the pawn back or that he saw a position that he knew for certain was going to be a draw. It just has the feeling of a position that should, with best play, result in splitting of the point. But when you don't have time on your clock and you're playing Hikaru Nakamura and you're going to be down a pawn, all those factors are working against you.
Yeah, that does make sense. Because you were predicting it from the start. Maybe if this were a classical game and he had more time to figure that out, this wouldn't have been the case. Of course, that's why we like Rapid. It's a little bit more exciting. You see more mistakes from players who can otherwise play with extremely high accuracy.
Yep.
And up next, we're going to see Dubov starting off with the black pieces. Hikaru is going to have the white pieces. Dubov is now in a need-to-win situation, meaning that he needs to win one game out of the next three. So it's certainly going to change his playing style a little bit. I don't imagine that he's going to try to win with the black pieces necessarily, in the sense that he'll play something a bit more risky. He might want to save pushing for a win in his last game with the white pieces.
And I see that at least it's set up, so I'm going to bring up the board here and just wait to until that game gets underway, but just want to update everything. And you're right, that Dubov trying to force a win with the black pieces often results in a loss much more quickly than it will result in a win. And against Hikaru Nakamura in particular, it's how you're going to get away with that.
Yeah, certainly so. And now, I guess, Dubov's chances of, winning this match have definitely gone down by a lot, because he was already an underdog, and now Hikaru has a 1-point lead. Of course, he still has chances, and I'm excited to see what creative ideas he's going to come up with, because that is his specialty.
I'm also changing to ICC because you made me nostalgic. Let's get those ICC pieces going.
I like the ICC piece style.
Me too.
I don't know about you.
It just feels like home. That's what it feels like.
There you go, chat. Do you like the new pieces? We see you in the chat. Let us know what you think. Maybe put some claps in there if you're okay with this piece. Otherwise, we'll listen to you.
They're so clean, is what some people are saying.
Some people are putting the yup in there.
Oh, I see that. I also said yup before, and I did it intentionally because I know these days, as soon as I say yup, there are going to be thousands of people just on their keyboard typing yup. And I'm like, okay.
Tag Vaughn, good to see you in there. Robert, you gained quite a few Instagram followers. rhess91,
Oh, no,
he went
stop
up by
it.
like 300, you guys.
Nope, stop it.
rhess, RHESS 91.
I don't use Instagram. Don't do this to me.
Maybe you're gonna have to now, Robert. You're gonna have to give the people what they want.
You're trying to turn me into something that I'm not.
Hess influencer. No, Hess would be like an unintentional influencer who gets famous on the gram because he's incredible at doing chess commentary, and then he just complains about it like, oh, now I have all these Instagram followers and I don't even want to be big on Instagram. I don't know what to do with them. And it would just stress Hess out more than anything.
Oh my gosh. You know, there'll be one time I post something snarky, and then now thanks to you, everyone's going to see it, and then it's going to be this whole thing. Whereas, you know, I'm not posting, Alexandra. I will watch your stories and then, oh, I'm streaming now, and I'll go click, okay, Botez Live is there. Shout out Botez Live. I'm there, I'm watching, but I'm probably not going to post much myself. If I'm being
Well,
honest.
I don't know, Robert, because now you have some new chess viewers, and you're helping make chess more popular by putting the Hess in chess. So, oh yeah, we can get some backstage Robert coverage.
I'm definitely going to get a ton of spam in my Instagram now. You realize that, right? This is what you did to me. I almost feel doxxed.
No, don't go that far, Robert. Don't go that far.
And thank you, Galodian, for the bit saying, cannot spell insta-chess without Hess. So...
Oh, man. I'm addicted. Okay.
And shout out to Papa Botez. Is telling me resist.
Papa Botez is like the biggest Robert Hess fan out there. He speaks more highly about you than of our stream, at least to us.
I'm honored. Thank you to Papa Botez. And thank you to, how many people are here watching right now? 28,000 almost on Hikaru's channel. Another 1,200 plus on mine. Thank you everybody who's watching, who's helping to grow the game. Thank the moderators for, everybody in the chat's being great anyway. But thank you so much for making everything happen, getting commands in, controlling, the vibe. And Alexandra, I cannot wait for the next game. I get in these moments where I'm talking, I'm filling the air, and I just want more chess. Is that so much to ask for?
No, I'm really excited for the next game as well. I guess no, never mind. I'm going to stop asking you about prediction questions here as well. The players have a break. This is pretty good. Do we have the prize difference for who wins the finals? And if not, I can look it up. I don't mean to put you on the spot like I always do.
You're putting me on the spot, but I have it ready. So you see that? The one time that you put me on the spot, and I'm here for you. And I'm going to cover the players' faces with this graphic just because, hey, we got it. So first prize is $45,000. Second is $27,000.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference there. Of course,
a little bit. Only $18,000.
Yeah, just a little bit more than the semifinals prize entirely. But that is a pretty amazing prize. So they do have something to be playing for. Quite a bit of pressure.
Ooh, and thank you.
Now you guys know what's at stake.
And thank you, Zero Divisor KSA. I see you gifting those 10 subs. Really appreciate it. And I also want to give a shout out to all of the followers for GM Hikaru because he crossed 300,000, which is a huge number. I can't count that high. Can't even come close to counting that high.
Wow. And you guys, the sub community, he's almost at 11,500. That is huge. And I mean, with the hours he's been putting on, it's amazing to see it. So thank you guys for supporting his channel and the incredible show he's putting on. And with that, we have Takeoff.
Oh, and we also have a sort of offbeat opening by Dubov on move 2 with D6. Typically after, okay, we'll go back just to move 2 for a second. After knight F3, this is standard play where you're attacking a pawn, black tends to defend it with a knight, and that way you develop a piece. Instead, Dubov's going, I'm non-committal. I'm going to play D6, and this is very standard at this point, but you'll note that there aren't really pieces attacking each other anymore. White has the better center in that you have a more advanced knight on D4, but it's like calm for black. You'll play C6, you'll castle. You'll just try to make this a slow maneuvering approach. That way, while you may be worse and there may be some increased losing chances, you feel like you're increasing your winning chances by not making anything too concrete.
And this looks like a non-beginner friendly opening for black because you have given up the space and it is so slow, but at high level, do you see this pretty commonly played, Robert?
It's common in blitz, I would say more so than rapid, because the more time on the clock, the more time white has a way to figure out how to punish black's sort of passive setup. And Hikaru is putting his bishop on c4. I mean, just look at the minor pieces here. These knights and the bishop doing really well in the center, pretty advanced. This bishop on e7, pretty passive piece, doesn't have any room to work with. You tend to play rook e8, bishop f8, pawn g6, bishop g7, pawn c6, like this slow, just maneuvering approach. But if white actually is able to play like an eventual f4, e5, for instance, and crash through in the center quite quickly, that can really backfire. You don't have all the time in the world if you're Daniil Dubov.
Right. So you do have to be careful with timing here. And honestly, this is a little bit of a strange choice given that he lost the first game, because this gives Hikaru some pressing chances. Unless this is what he's going for and hoping that Hikaru might overpress. And although Hikaru doesn't have to overpress, even drawing the next 3 games is going to equal a win for him.
Yeah,
so,
I'm just trying
I'm not
to
too sure about that.
Also make sure that the live board works underneath. So I'll work on that, have that figured out. But for now,
no worries. You could fix the live board, and I'll stay with the chat in this position here. So one tactic that I wonder if it works, and it's pretty common in these types of setups when you have a bishop on c4, is knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and d5, forking the bishop and the knight. I'm guessing the reason why he didn't want to go for something like that would be because I actually thought it was a line that might liquidate a little bit, which would be good for black. So I'm trying to figure out why he didn't think it was a good idea. Maybe because he's trading off the knight on f6, and if Hikaru would have kept his bishop in that variation, it wouldn't have been ideal. But anyway, so c6 on the board.
Sorry, I was refreshing and take care of it. I was listening to you, and c6.
Yeah, no worries. I just realized we were refreshing, and then I was probably just talking to an empty board because I couldn't put it on. So sorry, chat, if I just went off on a tangent there.
No, you owe no apologies. That's on my end. Don't take the blame for this. The one day I decided, I'm the host because I'm going to be a kind person, I'm making your life more difficult. So I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. I'm sorry.
Well, we're back on the current position. So we have c6, which looks like it's preparing d5.
a5.
In the future here.
All right, a5. Trying to get b5. Is the bishop drops to b3 of a4, trapping it, which is why Hikaru says, not so fast. I'm putting my pawn on a4, stopping b5 before you can even really think about it.
Also, I got note that my camera's a little bit desynced, so I'm just going to switch it. I'll be back in I'm still here. You're just going to not see me for a second.
Oh, that sounds like a problem.
Don't worry, we're coming back.
Oh my gosh. We have a purple camera with a red slash through it. And now it's in my name. And now there you are.
There we go.
Look what you did there. You made everybody see my name where you're supposed to be, and that's the biggest disappointment you can get.
Oh no, my head is so big now.
Well, I'll edit it. Don't worry. You talk about
Robert.
chess, and I'll take care of this.
I appreciate it. Okay, so Daniil Dubov, he is playing knight a6 with the idea of bringing his knight back to c7. We often talk about how you're not supposed to put your knights on the side. The times when it is okay to do that is when it's a path to a better square, as it is here, because one of Dubov's main ideas here, based on his pawn structure, is to push b5 at some point. So he can help that with knight c7, or he could play knight c7 and push for d5. So that's going to leave both pawn pushes as an option here. Hikaru is just playing really natural moves, though. He's just developing his pieces, keeping the pawns in the center. I mean, this is a very nice position to play with as white, just because everything you're doing is basically adhering to the principles of chess.
Right, you have both of your bishops developed on really nice squares, advanced squares. This bishop on c4 hits f7. This bishop on f4 puts pressure on d6. The knight on d4 excellently placed, where it can go to f5 at some moment, just to increase the pressure in black's position. The knight on c3 makes d5 much less attractive for black, because I have now 3 pieces attacking the square, whereas black also has 3, but you'll be left with an isolated pawn. So let's say you play d5 now. I go e takes d5. You try to take back with the knight. We keep trading, and a situation like this where you get a pawn on d5, for starters, I can probably take it, as your bishop on e7 is hanging in that variation, but I can also just move away, and the point is this pawn on d5 is not a happy piece.
Definitely isn't. It would be a target for the rest of the game there. So Dubov does hold off pushing it for now. He plays instead knight c5. Okay, so that's a different idea than I pointed out. I thought he was going knight to c7. Knight to c5 makes a lot of sense as well, because his knight cannot be kicked out with b4. the a pawn is holding that. He's putting pressure on e4, and it seems like the kind of play Dubov is going for is just, maneuvering his pieces around and holding off any pawn breaks for now.
Yes, and that's important, and that's why a5 was played, to kind of provoke a4 so that white's chances of playing b4 are quite small. You'd have to move your knight out of the way, play c3, play b4. That takes forever, and as you're pointing out, this knight on c5 already attacking his pawn on e4. So, what should white do now? It feels like white's pieces are on such good squares, so I almost want to keep them where they are, but queen f3 comes to mind, as if I play queen f3, later I can move my rook from a1 to d1, and I only have to watch out for bishop to g4, because that will be the move black is going to aim for if I carelessly move my pieces. So knight b3 played first by Hikaru, getting rid of his knight, which looked very good, Alexandra, but he's getting rid of black's best piece in the process, or the most active piece. So what do you make of this decision to drop the knight back to b3 here?
Well, it's certainly a unique move. I guess what Hikaru is going for is trying to find a long-term plan, because even though his knight was on a fantastic piece and he has everything developed, now it's hard to see how he's going to continue with this position. And that knight on c5 is a little bit of a thorn, so he's threatening to take it on c5 and double the pawns. If Dubov decides to take his knight and he takes back with his bishop, then I guess ideas he can try to go for here would be to bring another rook to the open d file, start putting pressure on d6. So the idea that I like behind it is that his plan becomes a lot more straightforward.
It really does. And the d6 pawn is the weakest square, I would say, on the board right now. e4 very well defended. Black still sitting passively. And a tough choice of what to do with his bishop on c8. Because if you ever play bishop e6, you have to worry about the consequences of a trade on that square, which loosens up the black pawn structure. It does get rid of your undeveloped piece, but it makes this pawn from f7 go to e6, and maybe there's just vulnerable squares and pawns that white will start piling up on.
Okay, and Dubov decides not to take the knight. Instead, he plays knight e6. Again, that looks a little bit weird because it's blocking his bishop on c8. Honestly, I don't love Dubov's position here. And Hikaru just retreats his bishop back to g3. I guess, how can Dubov continue here? He needs to move his queen at some point so that he can get a rook onto d8. That is somewhat straightforward here.
Yes.
And
well, I think,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you were saying you don't like his position. It's just there are no clear plans. Like, if I gave you 3 free moves for black, but not moves that win my pieces, 3 just casual type moves that develop, and what would you do?
Well, he just played g6, which is, it's a good idea. What he's trying to do is likely reroute his bishop from e7 to g7 at some point, because otherwise he's just going to have weak dark squares on the king. I mean, it's a very slow plan. Let's say I had 4 moves now. I'm asking for 4 after we already made one. So I'm really going above and beyond here. Something like queen c7, rook d8, bishop f8, bishop g7. The problem is it's way too slow, and now Hikaru has e5. So Hikaru is the one pushing the pawn break, and Dubov has to take it now. Otherwise, he's going to lose a knight or the pawn on d6. And after d takes e5, I wouldn't even trade queens here if I were Hikaru, because all of a sudden, Dubov's king is a lot weaker since he weakened the dark squares. So maybe something like queen e2, put more pressure on e5, and then Hikaru's plan is going to be to go for some type of kingside attack.
I love that move, queen e2, because you give up a pawn by playing e5, you say, take me on e5, and you can just take back on e5 with the bishop, and your position is still really nice for white. There's no real risk here, you have more space, but I really like queen e2, because as we've talked about, when you have more space, your opponent is the one who probably wants to trade some pieces, as the pieces restrict each other. For instance, this queen on d8 restricts the rook's access to that square. So after d takes e5, queen e2, I'm going to win back your pawn. There's no way for you to save that thing. And then I can go rook to d1 with the tempo. The king side is very weak because you play g6. As you mentioned, the bishop on c4 means that the knight on e6 often can't move because behind it is attack of the pawn f7. So all of just like the practical elements here favor white. So there's no reason to trade the queens. I really like your move suggestion with queen e2 after a capture.
And to add, Dubov also 9 minutes on the clock versus Hikaru's 13. It's not that big of a difference just yet, but it's just going to show once again that Dubov is not comfortable in the opening. Similar to the first game where, he played a little bit creatively, and then the position got very complicated and he kind of snapped and did an inaccurate move. And here it seems like he may have done the same thing with g6.
I think this entire game is influenced from game one. Because when Dubov lost that first game with the white pieces, I honestly think that to some extent he's resigned mentally. He's like, I'm going to lose this match today. I can't afford to lose to Hikaru Nakamura, who just beat Magnus Carlsen 2 out of 3 matches. Can't lose him with the white pieces and expect to win the match. Of course, Dubov is strong enough to come back from that kind of deficit, but he played something that I think he has been playing sort of risky chess with black throughout this entire event. He's played the Scandinavian, hashtag Team Scandi. John Bartholomew, if you're watching, you must be so happy to hear that. But the point is that kind of opening in rapid time controls can be punished quite regularly. And here, he is being punished for his opening choice. He did it because he lost the first game. If he won the first game, I think he would have played something much safer.
Yeah, that's very fair. Obviously, the first game is going to influence you. And I mean, we saw that in Hikaru's case as well when he played Magnus in the game where he lost the first one and he ended up going 3-0. That's not a score he would normally get, but that's what happens when you're playing in a match and you already feel like you're lost. It's really hard to get over that psychology, especially when you only have like 5 or 10 minutes in between games here. And just to clarify something I said, because I saw a few people asking in chat, when I said that his time wasn't that substantial, I meant he's not in time pressure yet, and there's increments. So like he could still figure out the position and be okay. But honestly, by the way it's going, maybe he's probably going to get to like the 5-minute blitz time format very soon, since this position is so complex.
And you look across the board, you mentioned it's complex. Every single piece that is not a single pawn is on the board. And we're likely going to see another pawn come off. But when only 2 pawns have been traded, this king is feeling kind of the heat of some of White's pieces coming its way. This is about to be a struggle for Dubov. Only 6 minutes and 50 seconds and counting down right now. Hikaru has pretty much doubled his time. This is just not the way you wanted this game to go if you're Dubov.
Right, and you look at Dubov's pieces, so I mean, his pawns don't have a lot of space. His pawns on the king side have moved forward a little bit too much, so he has a lot of weak squares. His bishop on c8 is not developed. His bishop on e7 wishes it was on g7. His knight on f6 is going to have to move. He hasn't developed his rook on a8 yet. I mean, I'm trying to look at something that's going well for him in this position. I mean, the knight on e6 that is his best piece, and it's helping protect the king, is also blocking his own bishop.
I would say the thing that's going well for him, Alexandra, is his hair looks really nice on the template that we have. And
it does. I kind of wish I had the shampoo he was using there.
And after that, I'm not sure what he has going for him, because this match is already 1-0 in Hikaru's favor. And then after that, this position is looking bad. In this game, you go down 2-0 against Hikaru. I mean, that's not happening. No comeback there.
Well, do you think this was just because he picked one of those openings that the Philidor, the way he played it, it can go wrong, and if it goes wrong and you're not able to get your development just right, you end up in one of these cramped positions. So I do think this was a result of his playing style, and it was a risk.
Yeah, he knew what he was getting himself into. And Daniil is a very creative player. We've seen this time and time again. He plays some opening that you're like, what is that? I've never seen that before. And then all of a sudden, he's better with 15 moves with the black pieces. So this does happen. But Hikaru himself said, if you play Daniil over and over and over again, and you can kind of sniff out these moments where he's playing something that is, let's just say, it leaves a lot to be desired. He's playing something that, if it works out for him, it looks great. But if you just make sure that you eliminate the counterplay, then it looks like this, in which case Hikaru has a pretty easy path forward.
And it's interesting that we're talking about this as if Dubov is completely lost, and then I check on your screen that your eval bar is at only plus 0.75, which means Hikaru's not even up a pawn here.
Wait. I'm hearing that he disconnected.
Wait. Oh.
What?
The game was abandoned. I guess it was lost. Robert, we called it.
Wait, but was it lost in Hikaru's favor, or are they going to resume the game? We'll get confirmation. I know lots going on here. I'm going to start asking behind the scenes.
Okay, don't worry, guys. We're going to check it out. So we'll get, like Robert just said, the actual
They're going to
relay
resume.
of what happened. They're going to resume?
Yeah.
Okay. And they're going to resume with what time situation?
That's a great question, because what is the penalty for that? Of course you don't want to win a game because your opponent disconnected. It does feel like, I'd rather just win on the board. It feels like you didn't win the game and didn't like deserve it, quote unquote. So I do wonder what they're going to do here, because there has to be some kind of penalty, as I don't think disconnecting and then all that should be just, you got to restart without any sort of time deficit or whatever it is.
That makes sense. I guess in this time we can check on your Instagram. It was under 1,000 when we started, and now you're at 1,600 followers. R Hess 91, ladies and gentlemen, can we get him to 2K by the end of the stream, just so he has anxiety about having to post on the gram?
Oh my gosh! It's funny that you're calling out my Instagram on the day that I decide to put on a dress shirt.
Well, exactly. I mean,
I'm ready.
You're dressing up for chat, so chat can give a couple follows here and there.
And I'm gonna give a shout out to Mr. Llama. And not just because Mr. Llama's streams are great, but because Mr. Llama likes to roast you, and right now you deserve it. So,
thanks, Robert. So kind of you.
Oh.
Okay, so let's see what is being said about the games here.
What's being said?
I think the app is down. Wait, so maybe it wasn't even Duda. I don't know. I actually don't want to say anything until it's confirmed, because it's probably going to take a second.
And people want the old Hess back. I'm looking at the chat, and there's, let's get a poll. Why don't we get a poll to see what the people want? Because, I changed. Quite literally, I changed my clothes. But I changed for the broadcast. And now I'm feeling like a stranger in my own seat.
I like it, though, because you're showing that you have a wide range. You can be wearing Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirts one day with your hair all over the place, but you can always also be like, oh, what's up, this is a dress shirt, my hair is smooth, nice to meet you, girl's parents. Oh, you already like me? Yeah, no big deal. Hess.
And now people are taking it upon themselves, grow out the beard. They want to be my stylist, and this is what's happening now. Look what you've done.
Robert, this is not what I've done. This is what the dress shirt has done. You dressed too sharp today. Now we know the real reason why Robert usually wears t-shirts is because the chat cannot handle him with a dress shirt.
You didn't notice, but I even changed my glasses. I'm wearing a different pair of glasses today.
You got it all going for you, Robert. Oh, well.
Oh, my chat. Gotta love them.
Yeah, no, the chats are being awesome.
This is such a good one. I would pay so much money for us to rip the dress shirt open to reveal the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles t-shirt on underneath. I actually thought about doing that, so I love that you said that, because I really had considered it. But I was like, let's just go full on professional look for today.
I thought you were gonna say the Superman shirt, because you have the glasses, right? So it would have been kind of like that.
Yeah, but I got my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That's it. I don't have a Superman t-shirt.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, I do. So I see the score now recorded as wait.
Nah.
I see recorded as 0-1, and obviously that's not the case. I also see their clocks reset.
I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, because on our relay, it looks like Dubov won, but I'm sure that is just a temporary error thing. So just bear with us, chat. We don't have the information yet. We're also trying to figure it out.
People want me to unleash the turtle inside me. That sounds weird when I said it out loud. Reading it made me laugh, but now I'm kind of questioning it. Oh my gosh, what a comment. Next time wear a turtleneck. I don't own any turtlenecks, but people already say that I look kind of nerdy, so if I wear a turtleneck, I'm just asking for it.
Yeah, Robert, we can't do that. It's like I had a comment on my stream. I think I was doing something weird, and chat was like, "Now I understand why chess players get bullied." So I feel like we need to be a little careful with our image.
I'm not really worried. I think that the people are enjoying themselves. I see nearly 33K on Hikaru's channel, tuning in, going crazy. I see my name everywhere, and that's honestly distracting and a little disturbing, but don't know what to make of it.
It's the attention Hess deserves. Robert, how long have you been doing chess commentary for?
Is the answer too long appropriate?
It is appropriate, but I'm also curious when you started.
When did I start doing commentary? I think my first bit of commentary was my junior year of college. Must have been 2013. Not 2014 sounds about right. So I actually, obviously, I played a lot of chess growing up. I became a grandmaster. I took a year off between high school and college and played on the U.S. national team alongside Hikaru. We go way back. But then I went to school, stopped playing so much, and I guess during my late junior year, people just started, hey, like, you'd probably be good for commentary. I was like, I don't know about that. Nobody wants to see this face here. But sure, like, why don't I do this? So I did some chess.com, commentary, and then some Millionaire Chess commentary. And so Danny Wrench, who of course is with chess.com, he was like, hey, let's see this work. I've been friends with him for a long time, and alas, here I am, still doing chess commentary.
Well, that's a pretty cool story. Thanks for sharing it, Robert. And now that you said the story, the players decided to resume. They were waiting because they wanted to hear as well. So we do have takeoff. The clocks have been adjusted. 7:45 for Dubov, 7:50 for Hikaru. So actually, the time situation is a lot closer. And they traded off the pawns on e5, and now we're going to see the queens traded off as well. So Hikaru likes the position with bishop takes e5.
So we have the position back, and as you said, the queens were... Wait, the time is reversed. There's no way Dubov suddenly has 13
now. Well, it was 7 minutes for both when I first looked, and now 13 to 7. I don't know what the time situation is.
That's hilarious. Unless... What's going on here? I'm so confused.
So, what's going on in the position, or with the clocks, or with the chat, or with your dress shirt, or with COVID, or with all the other craziness in the world, or, on an individual level, or really, why are we even here, Robert?
You're asking me the tough questions. This clock... Wait. There's no way Hikaru disconnected. I have trouble believing that. What is happening? Time must be reversed. And that sounds like a statement that, somebody who may need to see somebody would say. Time has been reversed. But the clocks have been swapped. It's a relay thing. Disconnect, relay. We're just trying to figure it all out with you.
Okay, so yeah, it's actually Hikaru has 13 minutes. Dubov has 7. The queens have been traded. Robert, do you think Hikaru's just like, I'll take a draw here. It's easier. He'll simplify and just win this mini match.
Give me a sec. I'm just making sure everything is okay. All right, cool. I think that Hikaru would be okay with the draw here. He sort of said that he would be against Magnus Carlsen once he got his lead. So I think that Daniil Dubov is no exception to that thought process. But he's just much better from the white side of these things. Every single move, Dubov will have to consider, am I creating a weak square? For instance, after knight d4 here, after knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, well, your bishop on e7 is under attack. This bishop has the b6 square to kick the rook off the d file and attack this a5 pawn. So really every single move here, and the knight on f6 needs protection. It's just so easy to play this from white and just aesthetically pleasing position.
It is certainly easy to play for white here. But I think it's less easy to come up with a winning plan. So, I mean, if you're Hikaru here, what would you be trying to go for long term?
What would I be trying to go for long term? Well, I would make use of my time advantage, which is currently flipped. But I would say I'm ahead on the clock. My position is looking excellent. And honestly, the onus is on Dubov here to figure out how to finish his development. This bishop on c8. This rook on a8, this combination of pieces not doing anything. If you allow me to take on e6, you're left with a really bad pawn after f takes e6 back. But that may be something that's necessary from Dubov's point of view. And just to show you something, let's say king f8. And I take on e6, you take with the bishop, we trade everything on e6, something like this. Although the pawn e6 doesn't look good, at the very least, you've traded your undeveloped bishop on c8. You connected your rooks. You can maybe move your knight to d5 at some moment. Bring your king up to f7 to protect your weak pawn. So it feels like black actually has some decent chances. Even if you end up losing one pawn, in rook endgames especially, a one-pawn deficit still holds good drawing chances for the side without the material.
Right, and I guess that is why I pose my question, because the position looks really good. But now that the queens are traded, I find it more difficult to come up with a good plan for white. Of course, he can just go into what you said, but that would give black some chances back, or he can keep his bishop on the board, maybe not do any sorry, his knight and bishop on the board without doing trades. But if that's the situation, his piece is already super active, and I don't know what kind of pawn breaks Hikaru would try to go for.
Right, and I'm just trying to see what's going on here. And 98 played. I guess it's just, I can't look at this position and not love white's chances here. But 98 was played, and I see that the evaluation bar is only at like plus 0.6. It's going up, it's going down, it's trying to settle in. The depth, the engine is seeing more and more, and so it's trying to evaluate many moves down the road. But this position is clearly good for white, even if it's not winning. After I put my knight on e4, black's pieces just can't move. And he goes knight e2, I guess, to go after the pawn on e6 in some manner, but I didn't like this move knight e2, and the engine also doesn't like it.
Knight e2, I understand the engine doesn't like it, but in terms of a nice strategic plan, I like what he's doing by rerouting his knight. And the other thing that I like about this is that maybe in the future he can play something like b3 and bring his bishop back to b2 if he ever needs to, hold the long diagonal, and then also allow the rook to attack on e6 once the bishop has moved.
Yes, and I'm gonna actually, I don't know how to make this time situation is irking me because obviously it's Hikaru with the time lead, so maybe I can just capture the time for black and put it next to Hikaru's. I'm gonna do that.
Robert coming in to save the day.
Tech
when the
support
relay is wrong, Robert does it for you, chat. There he is. He's gonna go switch the clocks for you. Aww, thank you, Robert.
I'm just doing what I can here just to see if this works because it's bothering me, and of course as soon as I set it up it's gonna change back, and you just know that.
I do know that. Okay, while you do the clocks, I'll look a little bit more here. So if Dubov trades off both rooks, that seems like it should be better for him, because then he should be able to defend his weaknesses. Even if he has one pawn that's a little bit worse than the others, the pawn on e6, he can keep his king on f7, and he should have pretty decent drawing chances. So I thought trading off the rooks would have been an interesting option. Bishop f6 I also like, because if the bishops get traded off, then he is going to develop his knight from e8. He's going to start bringing it into the game, and if Hikaru tries to keep the bishop, well, he can't move his bishop back to g3 because the pawn on b2 is hanging. So the only way to keep the bishop is to move it to d4.
Okay, and
the live board isn't updated either.
This is what happens when a player disconnects, and then not my fault. Don't blame me. I'm sorry. But I
no worries. It's not your fault, chat. We are fixing the situation.
Hey, look what I did though. You should be proud of me.
Oh, you fixed the clocks. Thanks so much, Robert.
I mean, I did what I could considering the circumstances, but
There we go. So now we actually know the clock situation. Who is this man? This is Grandmaster Robert Hess, ladies and gentlemen. The hero you didn't know you need until you started watching chess.
And I would say need is a stretch, but appreciate it, Alexandra. We're doing what we can.
Hero as well.
Dubov disconnected, and there's a relay issue. So doing what's possible.
Okay, so Hikaru decided to go for the trade. Knight takes f6. And then what I think is interesting is if Hikaru trades off just one pair of rooks and then brings his knight to f4, because then he'll be attacking the pawn on e6 twice. Oh. Okay, that is probably why Dubov traded off the rooks instead, which makes sense.
Yeah, so he trades off the rooks. He's going to go king f7, king e7, and then maybe even try to trade the next pair of rooks, because white needs to pile up pressure on a pawn. Two pieces attacking one pawn, that's the dream here. But if I can take the only open file of the board away from you, I am kind of forcing you to trade rooks there, unless white is able to play king f1, king e1 quickly here, and that way if a rook ever comes to d8, I can move my rook to, say, a1 and try to get into the game that way. So f3 played by Hikaru, bringing the king up from f2 into e3. This is a very strong play for the endgame. Your king wants to be used as an attacking piece, not one that needs to be shielded and on the first rank and away from all the action.
I like it. The king is very important in the endgame. He's going to start marching on soon. We got some rapid piece movement. Knight f4, putting pressure on e6, even though it's defended by the king. I wish Hikaru could play rook to d7. That would be a beautiful move for him, but the knight on f6 is doing a great job at holding that. So I wonder if he can go for g4 and g5 and kick the knight out. Unfortunately, he would weaken his pawns, and Dubov could just play h6 in response to stop that. So pretty straightforward. Now it's Dubov's turn. What about b5? Should he ever consider a pawn break?
I like the way you're thinking because Dubov has been in a bad position for the majority of this game, and now you're like, wait a second. Now the situation looks like it's okay for black. Can I play for b5? Probably not just yet with rook d6, hitting c6 and e6, but you always have to consider if b5, rook d6, maybe I put the rook in d5 and dropped a rook. Rook d6, b takes a4, rook to b8 goes after the b2 pawn, things like this. But I think ultimately white is the one happy to see these trades happen because the knight can always slide back to d3 and protect the square. There just are some tactics available that you have to watch out for, but I do think that ultimately it's going to be white who's happy with these kind of trades.
Right. And so if he's not going to go for any trades, what about trying to close up the open file and play something like knight d5? Okay, he played knight e5, so he didn't like that idea. He's instead pushing back Hikaru's knight.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just responding to something in
No worries.
chat.
Chat, this is the day we switched with who is running the broadcast. So Robert is doing it today. So unfortunately, he's tied up trying to fix everything for you guys. So that's what's happening.
Yes, I am indeed, and well, it was the disconnect. Everything went south after the disconnect, but we're here. We're getting it done. 35,000 people on Hikaru's channel. I'm hyped, Alexandra. I want to hear some hype from you.
I'm also hyped, Robert. I mean, after the game where with Hikaru and Magnus, that was intense, and now we're going for the championship title here. I mean, the championship of the Lindores Abbey tournament, but still the champion of the tournament. Hikaru is already up 1 win here, and he might get another one here. He has some chances because Dubov is very low on the clock, 1.5 minutes, and I love seeing players under time pressure because that's when things tend to get a little bit more crazy. You start to see more mistakes. Knight c5 I really like. He's putting pressure on 2 pawns here, on b7 and on e4. So both pawns are attacked twice, which makes me think that, I mean, Dubov might be in a little bit of trouble here. He can't defend both, Robert.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a bad move, e4. He was hoping that e4 would just trade off the pawns on e4, and we're happy to see that happen. But instead, knight c5 hits b7, hits e4. If you take on f3, I trade rooks first, and you take back. However you take back, I'm going to take on b7. I'm going to ignore the pawn on f3. I'm going to take on b7, take on a5 next, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then I have an outside pass pawn.
Yeah, so he goes for b5, which seems like the trickiest variation here. Whoa, and what happens if rook takes e4, f takes e4, b takes a4? Because it looks like maybe, you know, Dubov is getting a pawn back, but then his pawn structure would be so poor that the white king would start marching up. The black king would always be tied to the passed e-pawn, so I'm guessing white would just win that position pretty easily.
Yeah, that's the problem with the double pawns, is if you had a pawn on b4, you play a4, a3, and work with a passed pawn. But here, a3 is stopped, and you're never going to make it happen as I can just capture it. So instead, Dubov plays rook to d8, which tries to get this rook to d2. And we've talked about rook endgames, right, Alexandra, where you're down a pawn, but you have activity, and now thus you have counterplay. So this is what Dubov, probably out of the opening, he's like, my position looks cramped, it looks bad. If I have to give up a pawn, but get to an endgame like this, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Right, and it looks like Dubov is going to be able to get a pawn back because he's threatening rook d1 or rook d2 to start going for Hikaru's queenside pawns here. But at the same time, Hikaru also has ideas like a takes b5, c takes b5, and rook e5. So they both have to be a little bit careful here.
That's right. And Hikaru with way more time on the clock, so he can try to figure this out. I don't know. I mean, the clocks are still reversed, so it's confusing me, just like everybody else.
Right.
But
And chat, so the live board is broken. We are currently watching the live board. I think one thing we can try to do to confuse you guys less is draw more arrows instead of variations so that you guys know it's the live board.
yes, so it's currently white's move, and so instead of maybe
This
there,
is the live board, chat. This is the live board on
yes,
the stream. So don't worry, guys. We'll keep it like that and we'll draw arrows. So it'll always be the live board.
that's right. And so this is the live board. It's now black's move. The last move was king to f2, and I know how quickly moves can be played, so I'll just remind everybody whose side is to go. And after king f2, the point is that rook d2 check looks very good for black because I'm checking your king and attacking your pawn c2, but this rook will drop back to e2, stopping the check and protecting the whole second rank. The one advantage I would say black has now received by these pawn trades is you have this outside pass pawn, which I'm not going to go let that queen or anything like that, but it farther away from the rest of the action often is a good thing because you drag your opponent's pieces away to stop that pawn. But rook d2 check played by Dubov, Hikaru has to play rook e2 and then rook to d1, where now my rook can go to b1 or to c1 to start attacking your pawns and keeping your rook in a more defensive position on e2 rather than an aggressive position on e5.
And here Hikaru would like to play something like king e3 to activate his rook, but I think the problem with that is that Dubov would keep his rook on the d file so that the white king cannot get closer to his queenside pawns.
Although king e3 is a good move because if you play rook d2 next, offering the exchange of rooks, then that king comes into d4 and into c5. So you need to slowly work your pieces together to get that king right over there to the queen side where you're going to go and try to win the pawns.
How much of a factor do you think Dubov's clock is going to be in this endgame? So it looks like he's under a minute, but it is a little bit more simplified now than it was before.
It is, and I do think it's really tough to have an endgame where you're down a pawn, where you need to defend, and you're the one down quite a large amount of time on the clock. It's not a good combination. And this is a tricky endgame, because where does this black king belong? You probably want your king, to some extent, on the c6 square. That will require the white king to go to e3 first, just so you can cross. But if your king's over there on the queen side protecting those pawns, maybe there'll be a timely rook e7 attacking your king side pawn. So because the board is split, there are pawns on both sides over here, I'm not entirely sure where black's pieces belong.
That's a good point. And sometimes we make the mistake of thinking less pieces equals more simple. But as we've seen with endgames time and time again, there's a lot more calculations that you have to do because there's a lot more variations that look like they're okay. And I actually think you usually see that as well when you're analyzing an engine, an endgame with an engine, because engine will have like 5-6 moves that all have the same evaluation. But when you play them on the board, they have slight differences in how the plans differentiate here. So actually, even though it's an endgame, it's going to be tough for him to figure it out with less than a minute.
That's right. And you mentioned how the endgame will show 6 different variations that are approximately level in value for white, up the pawn. But then for black, there may be a situation where you only have one move to keep the disadvantage just where it is. Otherwise, all the other moves increase white's winning chances. So that's why these kind of endgames can be so tough. Action happening on both sides of the board. White's extra pawn is on f3. So you'd like to play g4, f4, and push that pawn, but that won't work with his king on e6. It covers the f5 square. So you can push some pawns, play g4, play king f4, try to play h4. But this rook on d1 is very active and can swing from b1 to h1 and attack white's pawns.
Right. And here, the plan you mentioned previously with rook d2, so that you're cutting off the rook from the d file and your king can make progress towards the queenside pawns. What do you think about that move right now?
Rook d2 looks good. And I'm going to show this on the board, and I'll tell you when I bring the live board up again. c3 was played, but rook d2, if you ever trade rooks, you lose this game because the black king has to stay tied down to the f-pawn, as if the king goes to, say, a6, I'll go g4 and push my f-pawn through, and then my king will go to the queen side where your king can help out. So that's why c3 was played, rook h1 by Dubov, attacking this pawn on h2. And Alexandra, do you play g4 here or h3? Both protect the pawn, but in different ways.
At first, I thought I liked h3, just because all of the pawns are protected, so it's a much more normal move to me. But g4 is also tempting because then you're not allowing the king to move forward. Okay, so he goes for g3 instead, which honestly is like g4, but with an improvement because it's still protected by his own pawn here.
Right, so the base pawn is protected by the rook, the g3 pawn protected by the pawn, and this king, okay, I was going to say can go to f4, but instead Hikaru plays pawn f4, which allows a rook f2, g4, f5. You get your rook behind your passed pawn, and that strategically is almost always a good thing.
Right, and now Hikaru has a nice pawn chain, h2 to f4, and Dubov plays h5, so he's trying to stop Hikaru's pawns from moving even further here. And I mean, Dubov is doing a very good job so far at trying to hold the position, but now Hikaru's king is getting closer to the queenside pawns. Should Hikaru... So let's say Hikaru gets his pawn to c2, his king to c2, then at least he's protecting the b2 pawn, and unfortunately, though, his rook is still tied to defending h2. So how is Hikaru going to try and win this? Maybe go for rook e5 at some point?
That's right, rook e5, and especially if your king's on c2, like king c2, rook e5, h4, rook g5. I'm giving white many free moves, but the point is that from g5, my rook will protect this g3 pawn, so that if I can also have my pawn h4, I don't mind the fact that the pawn can't be protected with another pawn, as the rook on g5 will be excellent. So I always ask him, what realistic dream squares you want? If you got a few free moves, what would you do? And that's why Dubov is not giving Hikaru that opportunity. Put his pawn a4 so that he can come after this pawn on b2. And if you play h4 now, I think that he'd probably just move his king back first or put the rook to g1. That way this rook can't slide out to the e5 square. So rook f2 played by Hikaru, threatening f5. If we trade on f5 and my rook takes on f5, I'm giving you a check, and your h5 pawn's in trouble as well.
I like this idea. Okay, so rook d1 check, king c2 right away. Well, now he's going to have to move his rook, and he can't stop f5.
And you see the evaluation bar. It's going really up there in Hikaru's favor. And rook g1, f5 is played. I'm trying to take on f5, taking h5. King c4, only move to stay in the game. But look what Hikaru is doing. He's going to put his rook on h4, where it protects the pawn on h2 and threatens the pawn on h5. This is what was overlooked by Daniil Dubov, and it is a very instructive moment. We'll come back to it because the players, in particular, Dubov doesn't have so much time.
And I also like that rook h4 is going to cut off the king from getting closer to his pawns or making any progress like it would if it were on c4. So this rook move does it all.
It does everything. And now you cannot protect your pawn on h5, which I will take with check. And now it's 2 extra pawns for Hikaru.
Wow. And looking at your eval bar, it's saying it's a clean extra 2 pawns. No compensation for Dubov. The evaluation is over 2 pawns. Dubov under 15 seconds on the clock. Oh my gosh, Hikaru really just squeezed this endgame out of him.
He did. Rook h4 check now is the move. Just you do not want to allow this king into a square like b3. So that's why he kicked the king off the 4th rank. And if you ever check me on g2, I'll bring my king over to a2. And then when my king's there, I'm very safe. I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, it's a nice safe haven for the white king because the only, counterplay Dubov could go for here, since his rook cannot stop 2 pawns. And if his king tries to help, well, then white can go for the kingside pawns as well, is some type of perpetual check. That's not going to work because, as you mentioned, the king can get to 8-2.
Yeah, and that's why g4 hasn't been played yet. Normally you want to push your passed pawns. You have 2 passed pawns on the king side, but g4 stops the rook from defending the 4th rank, so a move like king c4 would be tempting here. And I know I can give you a check, kick your king back, but once my king comes back to c5, there's no way to protect this pawn on g5 and stop my king from going to c4, because rook h5, I go king c4 back, throw in a check, try to bring my king into b3. So that's just, I know it's a lot to take in there, and we're going to leave the position as the live board as Hikaru thinks about it, and he plays rook to d4 so that he can defend his pawn on h2 with rook to d2 back. And what he probably wants to go for, and so there was check, the rook came back. He may even give up, and he does it.
Oh, and he did just give up a pawn.
I was trying to say it, and it was happening too fast. h4, you take this pawn, my rook is behind my passed pawn. I keep this black rook tied down to the defense of this pawn, and then I bring my king into the game. And that is exactly how Hikaru is planning to win it.
Right, because if his king gets onto the king side, I mean, Dubov's king can never try to go for b2. Although, Robert, what if Dubov's king gets to b... never mind. Okay, he made a different move. They're playing so fast, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because Dubov has to play quickly. He has very little time. Hikaru is playing quickly because the moves are obvious to him, and he is trying to put Dubov in even more time trouble. You can just take this thing on b4, I believe, and then play h5.
So c takes b4, king takes h5. Looks like, yeah, that's the variation you're looking at as well. And then Dubov will never be able to make progress because as soon as he pushes the a pawn, we can trade off, and the white king will be closer to the h pawn. So once the king gets close to the h pawn, he can kick off the rook from the squares the pawn wants to go to, and he'll basically be able to promote because the rook cannot fight off a king, pawn, and rook.
The only thing you want to watch out for is if rook takes a3, do not blunder rook a2 check, and that actually, you see the evaluation immediately go to a draw. Because if
Right.
you take on a3 first, you're allowing the rook a tactic, and that's why you would not take on a3 and make a move like rook h4 check and then try to win. But let's go back to the live board because actually this is happening. So I was at the live board. Rook h4 check. That's hilarious. I'm like, let's go to the live board. Wait, the board didn't change at all. Ah, we're doing a good job, Alexandra.
You're nailing it, Robert. Good job. Okay, so rook h4 check. The king has to go back. He's then going to trade off the pawns. And after he trades off the pawns, that h-pawn is looking to become a queen. He's looking for a promotion in his life. He's worked hard. h5, he's going to get to h8, and it's going to be a nice, happy story for that pass pawn.
The one thing you do have to be careful about is if you trade the pawn and the rook blockades and the black king is too quick. So king c5, he's probably even going to play b4 check. That way he actually keeps two pawns. The rook will be tied down to defensive one. This king on c2 will be quick to attack the other pawn. And the rook can't blockade the white pawns and protect that black pawn in a3.
You're actually right. I would have fallen into the trap you said because I got too excited with pushing the pass pawn. Sorry, chat. I'm here to show you guys why you can't get too excited when you're playing a chess game. So this plan does make a lot more sense. And we want to make sure the king can't catch up.
So rook g8, h7, rook to h8, and then king to b3. And, you know, I want to give a shout out to the over 40,000 viewers on our channels here. Hikaru's channel leading the way with almost 40,000 himself. But they're all tuning in for a victory for Hikaru Nakamura, as right now king a4 is played. And the one thing you have to watch out for is if h7, the king comes to b3. Don't get the queen that you want to get because rook g1 would be a back rank checkmate. So you have to check the king off of the b3 square first and then get your queen.
I love it. You're seeing all of the tricks, and it's nice to see that Dubov is still trying. I mean, he might as well. You should continue playing while there are still tricks on the board. But that being said, Robert, so he can still push h7. What happens if he pushes h7 and Dubov tries to keep him in checks with rook g1 and rook g2?
So check. So h7, check. I would have to start bringing my king away, and then I get my queen. I think that's.
I love chat's reaction to the eval bar. Ah, mate, in 23, yes, simple, haha.
I saw it myself. Oh, plus 60 isn't enough. Oh, we're going to plus 62. Yeah,
Okay.
The point is, I mean, you asked a good question. Like, I want to check you, and if you stay attached to the a pawn, then I continue checking you on g1 and g2. I got rid of my own arrows. So these are the key squares for the black rook. So the king will actually have to dart away, you know, into c2 and out this way. But after h7, check, king c2, a2. If I get a queen and you get a queen, it looks like, wait, you're defended here. But what makes this a win for white is that I am going to go checkmate your king. Look what it says. Checkmate in 2 moves. Just 2 moves. So finding that checkmate is one thing, but here it is. Queen e8 with check. The king can't go to a5. It can't go to b5. It certainly can't go to b4 as my rook's here. You go to a3, and I give you queen e8, check and mate.
Beautiful, nice little tactic there. Actually, it would be fun for somebody to try to solve the mate in 23. It's not actually practical because in a normal game, you wouldn't try to calculate it out. You just go for a more simple plan. But, you know, if somebody's is like, hey, I'm in quarantine. What should I do today? What about this mate in 23 puzzle? Well, let me know if any of you guys try that.
And I'm getting the 5-head compliments. I'll call it a compliment. I don't know if it is, but I think it is. Sounds good, right?
Mm-hmm. And I see that there was a resignation, so Dubov did resign here. And that's another win for Hikaru, so 2-0.
Yes, so 2-0. I will update the scoreboard right now. And
Oh, sorry. Let me update the scoreboard. You've been doing enough
Wow.
with the OBS.
Oh my gosh, I was about to go do it, but thank you, Alexandra.
I should have
it.
been doing it already. I should
No.
have been doing it already.
No, you're good. So we have a second win for Hikaru Nakamura. I see that his chat is going crazy. A lot of pog use. I don't know why they always talk about my alma mater like that, but they're all happy. And over 41,000 people watching Hikaru go to a 2-0 lead over Daniil Dubov in the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge.
Boom. Updated.
Boom, now it's official.
There we go, you guys. Well, that is a fantastic lead for Hikaru. The best lead he could ask for. He just needs half a point now to finish it off, and that means that he won the first mini match.
If he gets that half point, which I think he's pretty confident his chances, we're pretty confident his chances, and people have been asking me, like, what about this endgame? Was it winning from the start? And the answer is no, it wasn't. In fact, there was a moment there where Hikaru very smartly put his rook on f2, and he put his rook behind his pawn on f4, so that when he captures on f5, it's a check, and you're hitting the pawn on h5 as well. And as you see the evaluation bar, it's actually only at 0.48 at the moment after this rook f2 move was played. And the reason why is, we see the plan, we see what white is going for, but black can walk the queen, excuse me, the king. There's no queen on the board. Bless you.
Thank you.
Oh, scared me.
Sorry.
And the king can go back to c6, where that way if you play f5, and I take you on f5, and you want to take me back, you're losing your pawn on h2. So having the king on the 5th rank was actually a really bad thing for Dubov, and it didn't come from an oversight of, wait, my king's in check. What he missed, and I'll show that now, is what he did in the game was rook d1 check, and rook back to g1. His king thought, and I want to give a shout out, by the way, because Hikaru's channel right now is the 2nd largest on English Twitch and 3rd on all of Twitch. So I see y'all here.
Wow.
This is amazing.
Thank you guys so much for watching chess today.
What better thing could you do with your Monday than watch chess? You may have other things going on, but chess it is. But the point is that king to c4 was threatening. So if f5, gf5, rook f5 check, king to c4, let's say I just take your pawn on h5. What Dubov was hoping for was some kind of rook g2 check, forcing the king back to b1, and then probably some kind of a3 where my king is getting in, your pawns are losing some of their defense, and even if it ultimately doesn't hold, with little time on your clock, it's starting to look better for black than just sitting passively. But what Hikaru did was, instead of allowing this king forward, he gave a check on f4, kicking it back, and then playing rook to h4. So your king has no access to the c4 square, and I'm going to take this pawn on h5 with check next, and bring my rook back to h4 to kick your king off the 4th rank.
Right, and that was a very nice, kind of like it showed very deep understanding of the endgame for Hikaru there. And it's one of the ways where you can make sure that you're winning these complicated endgames is just thinking of the plan, even if it's a little bit different than your original one, that reduces your opponent's counterplay as much as possible.
That's right. Just not, especially when it gets to a blitz game, you don't want to fall for something. There may be a trick available to your opponent. If you can make it as easy for yourself as possible, that's the way to go. And Hikaru did just that. And Dubov's opening choice led him into a difficult endgame, which led him into a loss.
And Robert, I'm going to run to the bathroom. I'll be back shortly. Maybe you can show the format in the meantime.
Sure. And I see some good questions that I'll answer as well. As a new player of chess, could you explain why someone like Dubov, who isn't very highly ranked compared to some of the other competitors, has won against much, in quotes, better players on paper? Wouldn't this be considered a major upset? And I would say the thing is, in rapid chess, Dubov is better relative to his classical chess skills. He's an amazing classical chess player. He's crossed 2700. It's considered a super-grandmaster. But with shorter time controls, some of his unique stylistic choices, his kind of dangerous openings, where if they work out, they work out really well. But if your opponent kind of figures out the danger and then plays the accurate moves, then it really backfires. So Dubov has this adventurous style that works to his favor, particularly in the quicker time controls. And as mentioned, with more time to figure everything out, it doesn't always work his way. And so Dubov is the 2018 World Rapid Champion. So this isn't just some guy who's here just, hey, I'm happy to be here. No. He is somebody who has won the world title in this time format. So I think that he's not scared at all. It's just Hikaru Nakamura is an absolute monster. Just a beast. So this is sorry, one sec. Had to take care of something. People trolling in the chat. Never fun. But thank you again to everybody who's still with us here as your warlord. Hikaru Nakamura moves to 2-0, and we get ready for the next match. I wasn't triggered. Don't worry. Oh gosh. How has Dubov managed to beat Dingley Ren but not Hikaru? So Dingley Ren is number 3 rated classical chess player on the planet. Hikaru Nakamura in rapid chess, I think he's number 2 or 3 himself. In blitz chess, he's the highest rated player in the world. And also, on any given day, these players can defeat each other. We saw that Hikaru Nakamura beat Magnus Carlsen 2 days in a row after losing the first match between the two players. So these things change all the time, where Hikaru may lose to Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, the top 10 player from France, and then beat him in another match. They're so closely matched, these players, that on a given day, if you're playing good chess and your opponent may be a little bit off, it just sways the balance. I hear you, Alexandra, and now I see you. You're back. You're back. I see you. You're rescuing me.
Sorry. I wanted to give chat some alone time with you. A lot of the chat was asking, and I hope you enjoyed that, chat.
Well, the chat was enjoying me talk about El Dubito.
El Dubito? We're giving everybody nicknames now.
Just sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
No, it's okay. I respect it. So, one more game for El Dubito. He's 24 years old, right?
He is.
Yeah, so he's actually my age, quite young, or at least I like to hope so. But in terms of chess, actually, when you think of competitive sports, there's often a peak, right, in your athletic abilities as comes with aging. What would you say that peak is at chess?
No idea. Zero clue. You're asking me these tough questions, and I'm gonna admit it when I don't know things. I'll just say I have no idea. But has Magnus Carlsen even peaked yet?
I don't think so. Or has he?
I love it.
Dun, dun.
You're just I don't know how to answer the question that I made you try to answer in front of all these tens of thousands of people, and now I'm just pushing it right back at you.
Okay, well, I mean, if I wanted to answer it based on what super-grandmasters like Hikaru have said, if he wins one more championship title, then he'll be considered the greatest of all time. So that being said, it seems like he still has potential before he peaks. So I would say no, Magnus hasn't peaked yet.
Okay.
And Magnus is 29?
That's right, 29.
29. Okay, so late 20s, hasn't peaked yet. Maybe in his 30s. I think in the 30s could be an age to consider. That's not to say that players don't stay sharp even later on, but in terms of being able to compete with the youngins in classical. What about in fast time control? So in classical, I would argue that the age is probably later on because reaction time isn't as important. But what about in 3-minute chess?
When people peak at 3-minute chess?
Yeah.
Why are you asking me all these difficult questions today?
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I going? Because you're such a smart person and you're so insightful, and I like asking hard questions to smart people. That's why.
When do people peak at 3-minute chess? Probably when they're 16 years old.
Okay, is that a shout out to Faruja?
It's a shout out to Alireza Faruja, of course, who is 16 years old and is just a monster. He beat Magnus Carlsen in the Banter Blitz Cup, head-to-head matchup, and also, it's hard to say because internet chess was a thing, as you mentioned, Hikaru Nakamura. When he was younger, everyone would go in and watch Smallville back in the ICC days, but it wasn't as big as it is today. So people who grew up on playing chess on the internet, on chess.com, chess24, you name it, wherever you're playing, then you're like Lee Chess, etc. You grew up with it and you continue doing it, whereas I just don't think we have the longitudinal studies to answer that question. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that was a very not politically, that was just a very correct, thoughtful, PR style answer, but I respect it, Robert. It makes a lot of sense.
Gosh, I just went for it. It happened to
You
went
did.
for it. Hey, we have a new game starting. Look at that.
All right, let's get started. Did you watch Smallville, the TV show? What is Smallville? Okay, we have 15% of people. At least there's around 40% who actually know what it was, so we'll take that. But anyway, let's get started with the game. Match 3, Hikaru has the black pieces. All he needs is a draw to win. So he's probably going to play something a little bit safer. They are blitzing out the opening. We had an English opening from Dubov, which is known to be a little bit more positional, meaning it's not super sharp. You don't have these crazy lines in the opening. So far, looking at the position, it's actually not symmetrical. So Dubov has that nice fianchettoed bishop. He has pushed his pawns on the queen side. He has 2 pawns versus 3 on the queen side. So it's one of those end games where, it's one of those positions where if it gets into an end game, you tend to like it with the black pieces. But so far in the opening, you usually get a semi-open c file, like if Dubov were about to put his rook onto c1 in the future. I don't know why I'm going so fast. I think I got really excited. Slow me down, Robert. Slow me down.
I mean, we're all excited, right? Hikaru Nakamura right now playing amazing chess, up 2 games to none. And, you're highlighting the important things about this position. There's this bishop on f3 here, which looks really nice, staring all the way down to the pawn to b7. And Hikaru plays rook to b8. You really don't want to defend a pawn with such a valuable piece. But there are no open files just yet for black's rooks anyway. So rook to b8 takes care of b7, so that eventually you can either try to trade off the bishops, or maybe try to play for c6 to close down the bishop. But either way, I like the look of white's position here.
Yeah, I mean, white's position I like somewhat. I'm wondering, though, if I will like it after e takes d4, and either queen takes or pawn takes, and then Dubov is going to get a isolated pawn. He also has really extended his pawns, and I tend to be somebody who doesn't like to play with worse pawn structures here.
Totally fair. And I just took away the times that I added on because of the disconnect and all that happening from the relay in the last one. Now everything is set in stone. Wear Gucci.
Awesome. Okay, so we did see the pawn trade on d4. And Dubov, since he does have that pawn in the center, he now has some more open files. So he instantly puts his rook on e1. Bishops are doubled there. They are protected, though, so he doesn't have to worry about it yet. But Hikaru, regardless, puts his rook on e8 just because he sees that file opening up later on. Maybe he can even play bishop f7 at some point, just get his bishop on a slightly safer square. But in the meantime, okay, and he does it. In the meantime, Dubov is just marching his pawns forward. Are we going to see a5, Robert? He's going for a win.
He has to, right? He has no choice. It draws the same as a loss at this point, but a5 was timely met by knight to d5. And we're seeing some trades happen where Dubov is slightly better, and you can see the evaluation bar agree with that assessment, because look at this bishop on f4, better than the bishop on e7. This rook on b8 is worse than the rook on b1, and the rook on e1 and e8 are about equal because they're both in the open line, and when the bishop on e7 moves out the way, then the rook on e8 will have the length of the file. So I just think that white's pieces are a little bit better placed. You have to watch out for things like b6 if white got a free move, because the pawn on c7 is pinned to the rook on b8. And with these advanced pawns, sometimes advanced pawns are weak, but here they're limiting black's options. And so that is why I think it is slightly better. Even though it says about the evaluation is going up in white's favor, I would still call this slightly better as the engine tries to figure out exactly what the evaluation should be.
Okay, and rook c8 does allow bishop g4, which looks like it's pinning, but Hikaru can respond with f5 and stop that pin. However, by moving his pawn to f5, he is creating slightly weaker squares on e5 and on g5, so it is a little bit of a concession.
Although that bishop on e7, which hasn't looked particularly good, may go to f6 and just say, well, I'm taking care of both those squares with one piece while putting pressure on d4.
That's true. So you do like f5 as a move for Hikaru.
I think at that point I like it just because I have to. I really have no choice, and I'm saying, all right, I don't mind this trade-off of weakening some squares but making my bishop look better than it currently does. And Dubov likes your choice and saying, I actually think this favors me. And it is interesting when players disagree about certain conceptual things in a game like this.
Right. So Dubov is saying that he's all right with getting Hikaru's bishop on f6, and I mean, we don't actually know if Hikaru agrees or disagrees because, as you said, it was forced. But it's interesting that Dubov continues with bishop h5 because now he's trying to bait Hikaru into playing g6, but again, that looks like a pawn move he might want to play regardless because his bishop might want to get to g7.
But you are creating more and more dark square opportunities for white on the king side if you play g6, because now the bishop has to move, and let's say you play bishop back to f3, you're eventually going to try to let h4 and maybe even h5 to attack g6. And if I get my pawn all the way to h6, your king starts to feel like there is a checkmating attack on the horizon. So I think
I like that you're getting 3 pawn moves for yourself there.
Why should my opponent get any
H5,
moves?
H6, let's go.
Why not? I'm the one with control over this board here, so I might as well.
Right. Okay, so let's say that he does try to go for a plan like yours. So maybe we should play out something like bishop g6. White can either go to f3 or to e2. Bishop f3 would mean that he's okay with one of the bishops being traded off, which he might be because that bishop on d5 is a very powerful piece. It looks like he has a wooden shield going on. Look at that X action he has. So maybe bishop f3 is nice. Remove your opponent's wooden shield. And then if he trades off, queen takes f6, well, we're putting pressure towards b7, so black can't actually take d4. And I do like this position for Dubov.
Yes, it does look to be better for white here. Hikaru's sitting and thinking, and he doesn't want to play g6. And I think that most chess players are a bit nervous when you're pushing pawns in front of your own king, because it's creating some weak squares, the potential for an attack once you start pushing pawns on that side of the board, and that's why he hasn't played it yet. He might also be considering, can I just move my rook out the way? But I don't want to give up the e-file, as white's rook is already on e1, sitting happy and ready to kind of double and take over the e-file. So Hikaru probably will play g6 at the end of this, but I can understand his pause.
Fair enough. I mean, he might as well consider the options here. Bishop f7, definitely not, because it would bring out his king. So I think we've looked at all of the options there.
Bishop f7, yeah, it just looks risky. Even if it somehow is okay, I don't like
No, because you get queen b3 after. It looks terrifying.
Yeah, queen b3, your king has to go to f8, and just when your king is restricted, one more check would be made. If this pawn were on g6 now, bishop h6 would be checkmate. So it's good that your pawn didn't move in conjunction with this idea of bishop f7. But yeah, white is just doing very well here, and you see the evaluation bar going up in white's favor because the king is not safe. White still has more space. I could go after your pawn on b7 as well at some point with like a quick queen f3 hitting b7. Just bring my rook to e6 because bishop f6, I just take your bishop, I think, and just looks like there's an attack here where your king is running to e7, but maybe this is somehow okay for black despite it looking very suspicious as your king is marching in the center.
Interesting. I mean, that would be a fun position to see played out. That I'll say for sure.
And we're not going to get that because rook to d8 was played.
Okay, rook to d8. Now our bishop on h5 looks a little silly. So he moved it to f3 instead. We did look at this trade. If Hikaru decides to take on f3, the queen on f3 will be annoying, putting pressure on b7. But, it's not the hardest threat to stop. So it is certainly an option. Or Hikaru can try to keep his bishop and play something like... Actually, he can't move bishop f7 because then he loses the pawn. So Hikaru can keep his bishop by leaving it there.
Right. Saying, well, for now, yeah, I have to move your bishop on e7 if you're going to do that, because if I take on d5, I distract your queen away from the bishop on e7. But yeah, I think keeping the bishop on d5 makes sense if you just go bishop f6 first. As you invite a trade, the queen will be very happy to get to d5. And these kind of positions where still white is going to be slightly better, black at least has something to play for. They got a very direct pawn on d4. That one's going to be under attack. And white will play bishop to e5 to just try to take more space, stop you from attacking my pawn. But at least black's pieces are coordinated much better than they are in some other variations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do think bishop f6 is quite the intuitive move here. And hey, for the first time, we have Hikaru with a time disadvantage. He has 11 minutes versus 16. So this is the first game out of the 3 that it seems like Dubov has gotten the upper edge in the opening.
And that's obviously good news for Daniil, and he's way more time than he started with. I think he's recognizing that in the first 2 games, his openings weren't that bad. It's not like anything like that. It's just he didn't have enough time to calculate it when it really mattered, when there was a critical decision that kind of the results of the game hinged on, do you make this accurate move and hold the balance, or do you make a slight inaccuracy that now gives Hikaru the advantage where he can play for a win with no risk to his drawing chances. So now Dubov's, I'm just going to be up on time. I like my position as well. This is the ideal strategy for Daniil.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense as a strategy in a must-win situation. And does Hikaru have any plans that kind of just trade off pieces and give him better drawing chances here?
Well, I just saw a question, what's wrong with trading bishops and then taking the pawn on d4? And the problem with doing that is your bishop on e7 is left unguarded. And even if this bishop were not going to be captured, let's pretend that it's safe and on a different square. Queen takes b7 is played. And now my bishop is attacking c7. My queen is putting pressure on a7. And I've split your pawns while my pawns are very advanced and can keep kind of going up the board there.
Chespe, I see you shouting out my Twitch and Robert's Twitch in the chat. We really appreciate it, Chespe. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Chespe. I appreciate that. And, this is a good question. How meaningful / important is this tournament in the chess world? And
that's a great question.
Alexandra, I'll let you have first dibs at that one.
Well, this isn't like a championship, as in winner of this wins the U.S. championship or the World Rapid. It's more of one of those tournaments that's a good practice event for these top players. And obviously there are prizes on the line, so the prize funds are helpful. But it isn't a major tournament.
Interesting, because I have a different take on that.
Oh boy. Okay, take it away.
It's part of a larger tour, and so, while if whoever wins this match wins this leg of the tour, and then it'll continue going till we have an eventual champion there. But I think that's so great because obviously during COVID, over-the-board tournaments are not taking place. And I think what you were essentially saying was, for the U.S. Championship, the World Chess Championship, these are all events that take place in person, where you're sitting across from your opponent, making moves on the same board, and you have more time to think. Right? There are rapid time controls, although we have a World Rapid Championship that's played over the board. These are classical time controls where objectively the best chess is being played because you can use all that brain power and have time to do so. But I do think as we continue to see chess growing online, an event like this, where if you can position yourself as one of the top players and finishing at the top of the standings, with the growth that we're already seeing on the game online, I think that puts these specific players not just in a good position chess-wise, but potentially for different branding opportunities and sponsorship. So I do think that this is actually quite an important event, and all these events that we see popping up have real importance.
Okay, that's a good second opinion to it. I guess if you're thinking in terms of sponsors and things like that, it certainly helps. I guess I've just been so used to thinking of classical chess events in terms of importance to a player's career. But hey, we might be at some type of paradigm shift in chess where online chess is starting to matter more because of the viewership boom that we've never seen before.
That's true. And, and also, I guess, from an entertainment value, depends on what you're looking for, because this still is really top-notch level chess, despite whatever inaccuracies come with having just a couple seconds or minutes on the clock. So it is great to see this, and it's a great opportunity for fans to be exposed to these amazing top players, and someone like Daniil Dubov, who in chess circles is very well known, but to the broader public, that's not a figure that people know off the top of their heads.
Right, but now they will, because he did make it to the finals. Obviously, he's having a bit of a hard time against Hikaru, but it's not over just yet. So, huge credit to him. And once again, he does help Magnus with his openings, and he's known for just these super creative theoretical ideas.
That's right. And right now, in this position here, he's just still trying to increase his advantage. He has this pawn on b5. Now this pawn a7 is on a semi-open file where White's pieces, queen to a4 at the right moment, a rook to a1, are just going to pile up some pressure there. And so black is going to be stuck defending this pawn on a7, which means that you're probably not going to get the activity that you desire.
Okay, so rook a1 here does seem like a pretty solid idea. I wonder at what point Hikaru should consider trading off the bishops.
It's really a tough call. It frees up your kind of your queen and your rook, but at the same time it brings the white queen to f3, where it hits the diagonal and this pawn on f5. And I think we've seen that Hikaru does not want to play g6, as g6 really doesn't look as good with his bishop on e5 staring at the black king.
Yeah, that bishop on e5 is extremely annoying, and one of the key pieces in Dubov's position, because his dark square bishop is so dominating Hikaru's bishop on f8 for right now. Maybe Hikaru will be able to trade it off in the future, but for now it seems tricky.
That's right. And I'm going to bring up very quickly just a slide on Daniil Dubov, because he doesn't have the same kind of prominence as Hikaru. And just bringing him up, he's the number 12 rapid player in the world, 24 years old. His standard rating, just under 2,700. His rapid rating at 2,770. He won the World Rapid Championship in 2018. A World Blitz bronze medalist, third place in the World Blitz Championship. And he's been a Magnus Carlsen second, as you mentioned. So back to the chess. Just wanted to give a shout out to Daniil Dubov, who, even though the score isn't going his way, clearly a fantastic player and deserves to be in this final.
Absolutely. And he just played queen a4, so he's putting pressure on a7. And Hikaru has a few options to defend the pawn. So he can either play rook a8, which seems a little bit passive, or rook d7, which I prefer more because it's protecting the pawn on a7. And if the dark squared bishop on e5 is ever traded off, then it'll be easier for him to double his rooks as well.
That's true. And the rook on d7, it just has more other squares to work with. The rook on a8 is protecting a7, and that's about it. The rook on d7 also is staring at the black king side to protect g7 if that's ever needed. And as you point out, to double rooks in the d file to pile up all the pressure on this d4 pawn, which incentivizes black to trade off this bishop on e5 with an eventual bishop to d6.
Right. And so he did play rook d7, and the next move for Dubov I like is putting a rook on c1. Do you see a difference between either moving your b rook or your e rook?
He went rook b to c1, so you're calling the shots here. I think rook b to c1 is much more natural in the sense that your rook on e1 is on an open file. Your rook on b1 was simply protecting this pawn on b5, but that pawn on b5 doesn't need a second defender. The queen does a great job of protecting this pawn against this queen on d5, and so rook b c1 made sense. Rook to d8, going forward with the idea you were just talking about, and I'm thinking rook c6 is going to be played by Dubov. Gaining more space in the position just looks strong.
Yeah, rook c6 is a really nice move. The pawn on b5 is doing a great job defending the rook. Hikaru cannot kick out that rook with any pawn, or honestly with any rook right away, because the bishop on e5, again, such an annoying piece. He's holding d6, he's holding c7, and Dubov will be pretty quick to double up his rooks here. So this time it's going to be Hikaru on the defensive.
It certainly will. And after rook c6, I'm not even sure the best reply for black, because I want to play bishop to d6, but I also acknowledge that there are going to be some problems in the 7th rank after bishop to d6. This pawn a7 loses its defender if the rook must go up here. And just one sample line that I'm not saying is forced by any means. Bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes a7. If you think, hey, I'm just going to get my pawn back on c6 and take with the queen on c6, then here comes my rook to e7. And something like this is very scary for the black king, where white's piece is in the attack, black's sitting and defending with a move like queen f6, where you defend g7, but you also need your rook on d8, because otherwise rook e8 is a back rank checkmate. It's just not a fun position to try to hold from the black side.
And does Hikaru not have any perpetual ideas in the position you just showed?
Okay, let me go back to that. Sorry.
I mean, we haven't seen a move yet, so...
So there are definitely a bunch of checks with queen c1 check, queen c6 check, and then I play f3, and the thing is, there are many checks. I'd probably queen h6 to even get my queen into d2 as an option. And the point is that this king on g2 now is vulnerable to all these checks. So I think that you're right, that I should have gone further and thought, well, why do I have to play queen f6 right away? Let me just start throwing some checks in here and put the white pawn structure in a situation where there are going to be many checks available to black after a move like queen h6.
And the reason I bring that up is just because, if Hikaru does feel like he is in a worse position, then maybe he'll just have to go for something like that, where he understands he's on the defensive, but he calculates that he has really good perpetual chances. And like we said, if he gets a draw, this is over and he won the match.
That's true. And Dubov plays rook to c6. He doesn't want that kind of forcing line with all the checks and making it harder to see a white victory and easier to see how black would hold a position like that. But rook c6 was the natural move, and maybe after bishop d6, we'll just see a trade of everything on d6. And the reason why I like that more is if you take with the rook on d6 at the end of everything, queen takes a7 happens, and rook e8 is a checkmate threat because your rook left the back rank, which means that my rook now has access to it. And if you took back on d6 with the queen instead, after queen takes a7, I don't even have to play queen takes a7, but I'm looking at queen takes a7.
Whoa! Hikaru plays f4.
Oh! So we're going down some line that isn't even relevant anymore because f4 played by Hikaru. What if I just take that thing?
Yeah, hang on. This caught me by surprise. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't expecting this. So I guess what Hikaru is trying to do is open up Dubov's king to increase the perpetual chances. Like, let's pretend Hikaru's queen was already on f3. Then he has ideas like queen g4, if king h1, queen f3, if king f1, queen d3. So he does actually have perpetual in that situation.
Right, the king is just getting checked a million times, so I put a random move to show that. But the problem with doing this is, let's say you play queen f3 now. I know what you're trying to do. White gets a move, and rook e3. The g file may look scary at first from White's point of view, like, oh, I might get it checked a bunch of times. But then, like, wait a second, that g file being open helps me when I put my rook on g3 and then go after your king.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking if we already had our queen on f3, but in chess, timing is very important. So Dubov can do something to stop that defense there.
Yeah, that's. I understand why Hikaru did it. Sitting in those other positions looked very uncomfortable, and he probably thought that he was going to be ground down in a way that he was grinding Dubov down in the first couple games. And so he went for something a little more aggressive. But sometimes the position doesn't call for that. I understand it's like our nature to want activity, not want to sit passively and just shuffle back and forth and try to defend. So we go for a move like f4, giving up the pawn. But even now, I would consider queen to c4 for Dubov. And the reason why is I'm up a pawn, and trading queens into getting it towards an endgame should be really good for my winning chances, as if you ever take me on e5, I take with my d pawn, and now I have a passed pawn that you're going to have to spend a lot of time trying to stop.
Yeah, he's going to go for the pretty straightforward simplification idea here. And in addition to that endgame that you showed up, trading off the queens when his king is exposed is also a nice idea, because then he's not going to have to worry as much about perpetual opportunities.
Yeah, queen c4 just... and the biggest problem, like, if you made me name one problem, is that this bishop on e5 is such a strong piece, and I still don't want to take it, which is like, wait, what? It's the best piece on the board, so wouldn't you want to capture it? But then this d pawn becomes an e pawn, and now it's a connected pass pawn. And so that's the biggest situation that Hikaru is now dealing with. It's just frustrating when you're like, I have to get rid of the bishop, but even doing so still leaves my position in trouble.
Right. Well, Hikaru did go for the trades, so now bishop takes c5. I honestly would rather try to keep the bishop on the board than give him... I guess d takes e5 is... Okay, he can't take with the f pawn, so it's not so bad. It's not so bad.
Right, f takes, there's the d4 pawn that's lost. So d takes e5 feels like the move here. It's played. And...
Dubov up a pawn here. Just having that one extra passed pawn, though, isn't enough. But if he's going to be able to also, get his rooks like doubled on the 7th file or start putting pressure on a7, basically principle of two weaknesses, where Hikaru is busy defending two things, then he'll have real chances to win this position.
And rook d4 is a good move because it's trying to steal this f4 pawn, and you want to play rook c7 and double in the 7th rank, but you can't get your e1 rook there quickly enough. So I think that giving up the f4 pawn is probably not it. So I would play rook to c1, or e to c1, or rook to e4, just to protect this rook on c4. Maybe rook to c1 is better, because I would prefer to have my rook in the open file. So if I play rook to e4 and you take me on e4, even though my rook is behind my passed pawn, the black king is so quick to blockade it, and I would prefer to have my rook on c4 so that I can go onto the c7 square.
Yeah, and trading off one rook. So, I mean, Hikaru is going for it. Why does Hikaru think that trading off a rook will give him better chances here? Or is it just purely tactical because he also wants to put pressure on f4?
Part of it is, as you said, the pawn on f4 is now under attack. It keeps the rook on c4 stuck there for at least another move or two. But the other part is that if we think about the number of pawns on the board, white is up one pawn, and black is up a pawn on the queen side. So if black is able to, say, win this b5 pawn, which in order to protect it, you have to put your rook defending it in a more passive position. If I'm able to give up my b pawn, or sorry, take the b pawn as black for my a pawn, and then give up my b6 pawn, which will become a new passed pawn for one of the kingside pawns, if I just leave white with the pawns I'm highlighting, the e5, f2, and h2 pawns versus black's g7 and h7 pawns in a rook endgame, there are moments where that actually gives black very good drawing chances. So that is kind of the deep endgame idea that Hikaru is keeping an eye out for, is can I start trading off a lot of pawns here and then get into more theoretically challenging waters for white to win?
Yeah, that makes sense. So trying to go for the most complicated position for white as possible in terms of being able to force a win there. So he did play your move rook c1. And I guess based on that, we think that Hikaru is going to take on c4.
So you don't... I'm trying to think if you have to take on c4, because if this rook moves away from c4, then rook takes on f4. So I do think that the rook on c4 is tied down for at least one more move, but we also know that white, given some free time, will probably king g2, king f3, and so on. And the problem with not taking on c4 is that means your rook on d8 can't get active. So if you take on c4, you allow white's rook to free up from c4, but also allow black's rook to free up from d8. So Alexandra, I know I'm a little long-winded here, but what does that make you believe should be done? Should we trade first and then free up our second rook, or should we leave the tension?
I guess I still feel a little bit afraid to keep the tension, and I've been trying to pinpoint exactly why. And I think one of the issues is there might be ideas like, I don't know, I still think rook c7 looks scary, and that it would induce something like rook d7, and then it would be Dubov who trades off the rooks and gets his rook on a more aggressive square afterwards.
Yeah, if you get that rook down the 7th rank and then you force Hikaru back, that actually is the ideal situation. h5 played by Hikaru.
I mean, Hikaru is much more bold than I am, so he's going for h5 here. And it looks a little bit wild because, I mean, he has 2 pawns versus 4, and ideally he wouldn't really want to trade those off, but okay, white has no g-pawn, so he's no concern of that. I guess the thing is that he is creating a new weakness by pushing his pawns, but he's also creating space for his king on h7, where it'll be free from checks. And, you know, if it's like a dream position, maybe his pawn can be used to take away some of the white's king squares so that he has some perpetual chances.
Yeah, it takes away... If you can get that pawn all the way down to h3, for instance, you're also kind of cementing a white pawn h2, but it's not really that black is going to push this h-pawn, but you're right about king h7, king g6, king f5. If you can get that king into f5, and...
Heads up, there's smoke downstairs.
Whoa.
The alarm may sound. The alarm is loud.
Andrea must be cooking again. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, I thought that was...
I'm gonna... If the alarm goes off, I'll mute myself. I'm sorry about that.
I thought that was an alert that Hikaru has new subs, and that was like this random new alert. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool and interesting. Probably not safe for people to have that as an alert, but oh my gosh.
You thought that was I mean, you've had so many troll sub notifications.
That I thought that was one of them. And so, Alexandra, I'm going to have to guess that what just happened is going to be on Livestream Fails. So thank you for putting us there with... well, we should thank your sister for...
Yeah, I just don't trust Andrea with her cooking. When you see what Andrea cooks versus what she was supposed to try to make, it's you can't even guess what it is. You can't even guess what it is. Okay.
Yeah, wait, can you actually go, please, and check to make sure like everything's okay?
I think my parents are downstairs, so I think they're going to take care of the situation. But in the case that the alarm goes off, I will mute myself and go help diffuse the smoke.
Okay. I'm just worried now. You know, I care way more about the safety of you and your family than I do about...
Yes.
The house is safe. Okay, we opened all the doors. We're letting the smoke out. Okay.
Okay. Phew. Was that Papa B?
Yeah, that was Papa Botes just letting me know the situation is being handled.
Oh, Papa Botes, you know, just... I mean, we love Papa B. Whew, okay. Well, glad that that's taken care of. You know, it's funny because when you're live and doing commentary, you're like always thinking, what should I be paying attention to what's happening on the stream and on the screen? But then I was like, whoa, okay, like, we got to make sure that Alexandra's okay here because the last thing I want is...
Yeah, actually, I'm going to open a window. I'll bring it back.
It's getting smoky. Can we just get Papa B on the stream? Bring him with you. I know you can't hear me, but bring Papa Botes back with you. All right, you can't hear me. All good. So this position, King H7, was played by Hikaru. He's trying to bring that king forward. And if he gets the king into F5, it's creating some threats. But I think the white king just goes to F3, and these two pawns are too strong here. And you see the evaluation bar continuing to go up. Alexandra's still not back. There she is. Hey, Alexandra.
All right. I don't know if my eyes are getting a little watery. It may have just been random, but
Is that because my commentary is so beautiful that it brings you to tears?
it is. It brings tears to my eyes, Robert.
Wow.
Okay, I'm back and I see the rooks have been traded off.
Can we get Papa B on?
Oh, don't invite him. He'll love the spotlight and he'll come in. He'll tell dad jokes. Okay.
Well,
You have to be careful what you're asking for.
He is a dad, so those are just called jokes. It doesn't need to be redundant. we got it.
You know, I did think about why they're called dad jokes before, and is it just because, the generation of the people who coined dad jokes have a similar sense of humor because of, the cultural atmosphere of when they grew up?
I mean, you know how I always reject my
Why would all dads have, like, why would there be a specific category for this specific type of people otherwise? Anyway.
Mind blown. I haven't really...
I was thinking about that recently, and I actually don't know the answer, so.
Well, I don't know. So when I don't know something, I go back to things that I do know, which is the chess. And I think here rook to c8 is a very good move, because if I had a free move after rook to c8, I would put my pawn e6, and I'm getting my pawn across. So let's say you play h4. Oh, wait, it's white's move. So rook c8, and you play h4. I play e6, and there's no way you can stop me from playing pawn to e7. And if that's the case, the best you can do is try to put your rook behind the pawn, but I have the e8 square defended. So let's say rook d1, I play e7, you play rook e1, I get my queen, and you have to take. At the end of this all, white is up a rook.
And that is why the engine is going nuts. I mean, okay, not in your current position, but before it looked like it was at +5. So the engine somehow already calculating the fact that Dubov is eventually going to promote, and Hikaru is going to have to sacrifice his rook.
That's right. And thank you, Chess Bay, for gifting a sub to my channel to Alexandra, your sister.
Aww. Back to when Andrea had her own. Before we merged into one Megabotes.
Megabotes.
Exactly.
Sounds like you could be in Transformers with that name.
Yeah, we could, except... No, I can't imagine Andrea in a... Like, Andrea would knock over the set or something. There's just so many, Transformers would be destroyed by Andrea's clumsiness.
Well, good to know. So next time I have a say in who is in Transformers, won't invite her.
Yeah, sounds good here. Well, is there something Dubov might do to misstep here that's going to give Hikaru some chances?
Well, he played
Hikaru's
e6.
bringing in his king.
And Dubov is just putting his rook behind a passed pawn. And one of the big issues for black, in addition to being down a pawn and that pawn being a passed pawn, is you look at the queen side, black does have an extra pawn, but it's not really an extra pawn because his pawn on b5 stops the a7 pawn's progress. So if you ever played, let's say white plays king to g3 and black plays a5, I can take en passant. Right? That's a rule. For those of you who don't know, if the pawn moves 2 squares on its first move, and that's the only time it can move 2 squares, and there's a pawn that could have captured it if it moved 1, you are able to take that pawn on your next turn and on that turn only. So a5, if you've made some other move like h3, and the black rook moved to e8, no longer can you take this move. Look, it's not allowing me to do it. Come on, let me do it. Let me take en passant. No, you can't. Only on the first move. So that is why this one pawn on b5 is so strong, and that's why Dubov is giving away his passed pawn, recognizing that the endgame, the king of pawn game, is winning, because even though black is technically up a pawn on the queen side, it's not actually an extra pawn based on how the pawn b5 just stops the a7 pawn's progress.
Right, and so on this position, it seems like what Dubov is going to have to do is keep his king on the king side. He plays king f5, and the reason for that being that if he were to play something like king d5, then Hikaru could have played king d7, and his king wouldn't have made progress. Distracting the king away from the kingside pawns wouldn't have been helpful because he can't just make a pawn break with the way his pawns are structured. So what he's doing instead is he's just going to get that g pawn or that h pawn, and once he gets, let's say, the g pawn, he'll have a passed pawn, and his win is straightforward.
Yeah, and the only thing black can do to even defend the h5 pawn is king f7, king g5, g6. But then white plays f5. I get rid of one of my double pawns. I simply trade on the f5 square. I go back to win your h pawn, and now I have 2 passed pawns. And once more, this pawn on a7 is stopped because this pawn on b5.
Yeah.
It's over.
And I see Hikaru resigned, guys. That is 2-1 now. Hikaru is still in the lead. But now he's going to have to go into his next game with a little bit of a more difficult psychology.
He only needs a draw still to win this mini match. He's up 2-1, but you never feel quite as good as you do after a loss as you do after you win a game, right? So now he's like, okay, do I trust myself? Dubov played an excellent game. Honestly, a very classy game from start to finish by Dubov, and that's goes to show he's not going down without a fight, and he gets the black pieces in the final game. That's in a tough spot. However, he's capable of beating Hikaru Nakamura, as he just showed.
Right, and of course, and a reminder, you guys, in this time control and rapid, Dubov was the world champion in 2018, so he's a world-class rapid player, hard guy to defeat. But Hikaru does have the white pieces next game, and he only needs a draw.
He does, and so Dubov will have to play a Dubovius opening with
Cute.
where he's just trying to avoid opening theory, try to play a position where is that
Your sister is sleeping, so let's not.
I don't know if people can you tell chat that?
yeah. Can you come?
Hey, chat. I would like to defend. I'm not sure what the heck is to defend here, but like mother, like daughter. It wasn't Andrea. Let's not put it on Andrea this time. It was my wife who was experimenting with microwave cooking, and happened before where our neighbors are trying to say, "Oh, Andrea, you're cooking." How is the smoke coming out of the window? So I think it's a family thing that my wife shared with my daughter. So let's not put it on Andrea. She's a wonderful cook, exactly like her mom and her sister. Okay, bye guys.
Papa Botes to defend Andrea's honor.
That is the dad of the year right there. Just coming there saying, "Sister, calling out sister. I'm not going to stand for it when it wasn't her fault."
Okay, it was my mom. It was my mom.
Wow, but wait for Papa Botes to throw Mama Botes under the bus there.
Well, my mom is like a terrible cook, and she knows this.
Whoa.
No, but she knows it. She knows it.
Whoa.
She knows it. She knows it. She knows it. Okay. She kind of takes pride in being a terrible cook. Okay. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna. No, guys, she admits it. She self-admits it.
Let me ask you something. Do you eat the meals that she makes?
Sometimes yes, but like my mom will forget to put ingredients in. So like she'll make bread and then she'll take it after and it's as hard as a block. And she was like, "Why aren't you eating the bread?" And I remember being 12 and I just knocked the bread against the table and it sounded like a block. And I was like, "Well, Mom, that's probably why."
Well, I guess this has become a cooking channel. So for all of you still with us here, all 42,000 plus of you collectively, I hope you enjoyed that. It seems like Alexandra blames her sister, then says her mom's a bad cook.
Okay, you're not painting me in a good light here, Robert. I thought it was Andrea, but it makes sense that she's sleeping.
I'm not the artist here. You painted yourself. I did nothing. In fact, should I show some of your artwork? I have that.
Yes. Oh, do you have the portrait I drew of you?
I do. I'm gonna go bring that. Give me 1 sec. I use it as my bookmark.
Oh, that's great. So at Pro Chess League Finals, I think we were all just hanging out on one of the end days, and naturally, Robert is such a muse that I decided to sketch him, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
I was just talking to Alexandra, and she's busy doing something with a pen. I was like, "What's going on?" And let's see if everybody can see this. This is Alexandra's artwork, allegedly of me, with her signature there. So
it's so good.
Let's see.
Oh, wait, look in the same direction, please. Thank you. You had a beard back then.
I did. I had a pretty big beard. But
so I thought it was pretty good, honestly.
Oh, I'm appreciative. I use it as my bookmark. So wait, now I don't know what page I'm on. I just took it out of the book.
Oh, no.
That was not thought out very well by me. I was like, "Oh, I'm so excited to go grab your artwork, show everybody your talent." And now I don't know what page I'm on. So
well, I'm honestly really honored that you kept it.
This is, how could I not? This is a wonderful drawing.
Thank you for showing that off, Chad. I hope you enjoyed it.
And I would say that nobody's drawn an image of me before, but I have another thing. When 11 years ago, I was playing a tournament in Greece, and someone after the end of the game, they just hand me something. I was like, "Wait, this is weird. What's going on?" Let me drag that here for you. 1 second, everybody. It's sitting here on my desk.
So Chad, if you want Robert to keep something of you, just give him a drawing. Give him a drawing, and he seems to keep these.
This is a drawing of
Oh
me.
my god. Okay, don't show that one after mine.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, you're making me look bad.
Well, you're the one who made me look bad. Don't try to turn this around and say I'm doing something wrong.
Let's not compare the two anymore.
So somebody drew that, and I was at first, like I said, I was like, "What is going on? Who is this person? What are they doing? Why are they coming up to me?" And I was super appreciative. I have no idea to this day who that person is.
I mean, you framed his, but mine made it as a bookmark, so you probably see it more often, which I'm okay with.
I mean, it's not every day that somebody like takes you're playing chess and just draws it, and then it's good enough where you want to.
That sketch is honestly, it's awesome, and it must have been such a nice memory from the tournament as well. So
I also played really well in that tournament, so that didn't hurt my memories of it.
oh man, I watching all this chess in classic. I mean, no, this is not classical chess, but I really miss classical chess.
You know, as somebody who doesn't really play that much anymore, I would say, no, but then I get that itch every now and then. And
when you haven't played for a while, that's when you start to want to.
It is true. It is true. And you just start commentating on all these games. You watch other people play, and you're like, oh gosh, like I kind of want to play too. Let me in, coach.
Exactly. I mean, it's fun to commentate. And I've been doing so much more commentary on Twitch lately. And before I used to just play all the time and miss doing commentary. But now that I'm doing more commentary, like, oh man, I kind of just miss playing Blitz, you know?
Yeah.
Why is chat spamming this emote? Dance game?
Huh? What?
I don't even know. I don't know what that emote means. Dance game.
I don't know what that means either. I mean, you're way more in the Twitch know than I am.
Well, we're learning. We're learning. Have you learned what shungite is yet?
No, and do I want to know?
Oh, sorry, Dan game. Just thanks for correcting me.
I know
man, maybe I'm the one who needs to go to Pog University, not you, Robert.
I do know what the wooden shield is, so I've learned that. And everybody can learn about the wooden shield because there it is, the wooden shield. Look, bing, no, bing, bang, pow, bang, boom, quad. It's a wooden shield. That's a wooden shield, see? Because it makes an X. So I learned, and I created.
Wow, that was fantastic reading, Robert.
Just, I was inspired.
Okay, wait, can I give you a challenge?
I'm scared. What is it?
Okay, can you try reading it again, but this time in the voice of a scared opponent who has to play against a wooden shield? Go!
Wait, that's too hard.
Come on, Robert.
Making me scared that's a huge accomplishment. So, it's not happening. Just not happening.
Robert, just throw it away. My idea. I'll take it. That's fine, Robert. Whatever. I don't even want to see it.
Well, I can also teach you about the ice skater.
Okay, teach me about the ice skater instead.
Okay. It's the ice skater. Oh! I just did the ice skater, dude! The classic move. The pickaxe. The ice climber. The wobble. The juicer. The lord. We did the backwards catapult. The scissor lift, dude. We did the backwards frozen glasses.
Do it! Oh, I love the way you say that.
It just happens. It comes to me every now and then.
Oh man, that was epic, Robert. You have talent, dude.
And I'm being told I should be a voice actor.
Yeah, you do have a very good voice for. It seems more like for radio, like you could be on NPR, you know?
Oh my gosh, you keep telling me I got that face for radio. It hurts every time.
No, you have the voice for radio and the face for TV. You have it all, Robert. I know you're just fishing for our compliments, but we'll give them to you anyway.
After that drawing you made of me, I'm hurting. It hurts.
Do not let my lack of drawing skills be a testament to your movie face. Okay?
This is what you think of me. Okay, I see what you think of me. This is it.
That's art. What that person? He looks like he should be Miss Universe. Okay, Mr. Universe.
Wow, look at you. Look what you're doing here.
No, it's a pretty decent sketch. Okay.
I have a voice for a newspaper. I saw a chat just say that's pretty cool. I do like writing, so.
Oh man.
Is the next game ready?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna mix up another emo. Like God knows what I'm gonna do wrong.
This is one of those where I just leave and I put up the "you'll have to spell chess without Hess for now," and I just go away and hide. for the time being?
Oh, well, no. We're here. We have one more game, you guys. So.
Oh, we're totally here. But I had to put it up just because I need to hide my face.
Aw, this is a cute one.
But we're here, so you don't gotta use it. We don't gotta use it.
No, I like that one.
Oh,
Please stay, Robert. We love you, says Blue Orlick. Aw. Chat, you guys have been so supportive. We really appreciate it. Speaking of, let's check up on Robert's Instagram. It's been a while.
No.
RS91.
No.
Chat, he's at 1,969 followers, you guys.
How did you do
Started
this to me?
under 1,000. We're gonna double him, and then we can keep commenting on his photos. New photo when? Oh, he's gonna love it. Robert is such an Insta fan. He's gonna go private and get tilted after this, but it's so worth it.
I just randomly made an Instagram account one time because I was like, okay, my younger cousins wanted me to make the Instagram. I'll do it. Sure. And now I'm immensely regretting that decision. Like, not even a little bit. Not even a lot of it.
Over 2,000! Oh my god, 2024, Robert. It's happening. You're gonna have to do some updates now. Oh, look at Robert just drinking some beer, having a good time.
That's my brother. That's my brother drinking that beer.
Oh, wow. You guys look so alike. I mean, I know I've met your brother in person as well, but this photo really
You want
looks
to
like
tell everybody where you met my brother?
Yes, I met your brother at a Saddleman concert, which is a band from Robert's friends in college. And honestly, they were amazing. And Robert really gets lit at concerts, so it was pretty fun to watch.
I was having a good time. I was just bopping around. We have another game, though, so at long last, I can move on from everything else besides chess and go, back to the chess.
Chat, you guys have to stop telling me I'm cringe. Like, this is my personality. It's not going to change. I've been like this for a while. You got to embrace it or, it's the way it is.
Well, we'll wait for, so I can put the live board beneath me, but we do have the live board on the large board, the analysis board, where Hikaru just has a big center here with pawns on d4 and e4, and now has played e5, just trying to gain even more space. Can always just capture back with the pawn on e5. But I think from Dubov, Alexandra, you can disagree, but I feel like this was a relatively good choice by him, because even though there will be some trades coming up, it's not, all the trades in the world, and so he does have a chance to play for more than just the half point.
Right, and I'm just going to remind one more time, Twitch style, in case there's new people coming in. So the score is currently 2-1 for Hikaru here, and it is a best out of 4, so Hikaru only needs a draw. If Dubov somehow wins this game and it's 2-2, then they're going to go to Armageddon, and we'll explain the rules if we get there. Hikaru has the white pieces, so it should be easier for him to play this than for Dubov, but so far it seems like a pretty solid position for both.
Yeah, and white has the better center. You have a more advanced pawn in the center of the board. Black's pawn e6. It's good, it's safe and sound, but the pawn d4 is taking away the c5 square, the e5 square from Black's pieces. So knight to d2 played by Hikaru, blocking the bishop. You may think that's weird. Why would Hikaru block his bishop before developing it? His knight can go to c4 or likely e4 next, and once the knight gets out, the bishop is free, and the knight is attacking the black bishop on d6 and putting pressure on c5. So that's why Hikaru first moved the knight.
All right, so the knight moved to f6 now. I like knight c4 because that square is not controlled by the black knight, and he's putting pressure on the bishop on d6, and let's say the bishop moves away to e7, well, then all of a sudden you have the f4 square freed up for your bishop. And if the bishop goes to c7, well, then he's putting the bishop on one of the files that's about to open, so in the future he'll end up blocking his rook.
It's a great point. So I like knight c4. Next for Hikaru, he played queen e2, where he's just keeping this knight on d2 for now, maybe trying to go knight e4 because of the match situation. Start trading more pieces, liquidating, saying in any endgame, white should have no real trouble, and he's playing very quickly. So Hikaru has more time than he started with.
Yeah, that means that he's very familiar with his opening here, but I mean, so is Dubov, who's also over 15 minutes. Queen on c7 here. He's connecting his rooks. He's also putting pressure on h2 if the knight on f3 were to ever move. And also now, if Hikaru were to try something like knight c4, he can't put his bishop on f4 because the queen is holding that square.
That's right. So black has control of the f4 square, maybe put the bishop on f4 himself. And, oh gosh. I have a new next Instagram post idea that I'm being told, so.
Oh, what is it?
Can't tell you. You'll just have to see it later.
I guess we're going to have to follow Arhes91.
Oh, why can't you just share like my Twitter or something more casual? Actually, don't do that. Nope.
Because I have to share the one social platform you like least because it has to be kind of a troll to
So
you.
share my TikTok.
Your TikTok that doesn't exist.
Well,
I wish
there it
you had
is.
a TikTok. I wish you had a TikTok.
Well, there it is. There's one thing you can't reveal to the world because I don't have a TikTok account.
Sad times, Chad. Sad times. Okay, bishop g5 played by Hikaru. He's not trying to trade off his bishop here, but it is a good square to put the bishop regardless. He needed to develop it somewhere, and if he would have moved it to d2 or e3, he's taking away some space from his own pieces, so g5 is a nice idea here.
And often... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say knight has to take to not create an isolated pawn.
And that's true. And I was going to say that the bishop on g5, you said it couldn't go to f4, which is, of course, right, the queen's on c7. Often this bishop goes from h4 to g3, so it can kick the queen off the diagonal and have more space to work with. The bishop on g5, it hits the knight on f6, but it doesn't feel like a powerful diagonal, whereas if that bishop could get to g3, you're immediately hitting some of the more vulnerable squares in black's position.
Okay, and Dubov plays rook a c8. I like that he's bringing his a rook in because his f rook would likely like to go to d8, the only open file on the board. He is forcing Hikaru to move his knight back to e3, and now Dubov has all of his pieces developed except for the rook on f8, so maybe we'll see rook d8 in the future. He has no weaknesses in his pawn structure, and I guess on Hikaru's end it's somewhat similar. Very solid position from both sides, but asymmetrical, right? So we have Daniel Dubov on the open c file with his queen and his rook, Hikaru on the semi-open e file. We got a knight in the center, so even though no weaknesses and equal material, I think we're still going to be seeing play from both sides just because of the asymmetry.
And Dubov did develop that rook as you were suggesting he do, when rook to e8, and he's protecting the bishop on e7, not just because the knight wants to move out of f6, but because if you play rook to d8 instead, there are some ideas with knight to f5, as the pawn on e6 is pinned to the bishop on e7. So knight f5 hits the bishop, and if you take it, then I would take on e7. And this kind of situation would be advantageous for white, getting the bishop, hurting black's pawn structure. Of course, black doesn't have to take on f5, can just retreat the bishop, but that's likely what Dubov was calculating and why he went rook to e8, and after rook d1 played a6, taking away the b5 square from the white knight.
And a6 is a really nice move because knight b5 could have been pretty annoying. So we're seeing some slow play from both sides here where they're just anticipating what their opponent is trying to do. So Hikaru now moves bishop h4 with the idea you mentioned earlier. His bishop on g5 isn't really doing as much anymore, so he does want to eventually get it to g3. And it's kind of slow to find any other kind of plan here.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a slower plan, and for Dubov, he plays b5 because he's just trying to advance on the queen side. The problem with that is a timely a4 can be a problem. The queen on e2 stares the diagonal, and behind the pawn b5 is a pawn a6. And I just saw a question, or a kind of a comment in my chat. Can you explain what an open file is for people who are newer to chess, and the d file doesn't look so open? And the d file doesn't look that open because there's a knight on d4 standing in front of the rook on d1. But an open file is just one where there are no pawns. And so a rook likes to go to the open file because it has the most access that it will get on the board. If you put your rook on c1, you're blocked by your own pawn on c3. Back on a1, you're blocked even more closely to you with this pawn a2. So rooks like to go to the open file so that they have room to work with. But it's a good point that this file doesn't look quite so open despite the fact that there are no pawns on it.
Right, and a semi-open file is when there's just one pawn open on it. So that's how you usually prioritize where to put your your heavy pieces, which is the queen and the rook. I guess that's kind of what we use in chess slang.
Yeah.
Because the pieces are heavier on the board. They're a little bit bigger than the rest of the pieces.
True. You can call them the major pieces, but we call them the heavies.
It's okay, queen and rook. You guys are looking good, Heavy is a compliment. They're thick. The thick pieces, chat.
With how many C's?
Obviously 2, Robert. Do you need to ask? Come on.
I mean, some people they prioritize the amount of C's. I'm just asking. I did need to ask. Not all of us have the same spelling technique as others.
No, that's true. That's true. Okay, so a3 by Hikaru as well. So this is to just prevent any future b4 moves. Queen b7. Okay, both sides are being very quiet here. I like that the queen is starting to control the light squares because Hikaru is missing that light squared bishop. And, maybe in the future we'll see something like knight d5 or knight e4. Not right away, but to keep in mind eventually.
Yeah, and once this knight moves forward to e4, not e5, that also opens up a bishop exchange. But isn't that sort of the problem for Dubov? Is he can advance his pieces but trade off others, and he's trying to figure out, can I keep as many pieces on the board so that the position doesn't simplify and Hikaru gets closer and closer to the half point that he needs?
Yeah, that's a very good point because if the position keeps going the way it is now, where there's not a lot of weaknesses, I mean, this is definitely a position Hikaru can at least hold. He's not really in any danger here, and Dubov has to come up with some creative ideas. So, that being said, what are the most two-sided ideas you can see for Dubov here? So maybe something that's aggressive, even if it gives Hikaru counterplay as well.
Trying to think about this. Maybe bishop d8 and bring the bishop to b6. And the bishop on e7, well, I don't want to go to c5. Why am I going to d8? I was just trying to figure out how to get my bishop away. But somehow bishop c5 going and just hitting the knight on e3. Sometimes you capture the knight on e3, say, well, now I have two knights against a bishop and knight. And that might not be the best thing in the world, but it's at least some kind of imbalance, and that gives me chances. I don't really see that many opportunities because Hikaru is playing so solidly here.
Fair enough. And now he just plays bishop g3. Again, putting his bishop on a good square here. I think in the future we might even see him pushing his h-pawn just to give his king and his bishop some space if ever needed. What about knight h5 here? Speaking of creating imbalances.
Knight h5 looks like a good move because then you're going to steal this bishop on g3, trade off for the knight. And now we say, all right, I have a bishop and knight for black versus two knights for white. Not the end of the world for Hikaru by any means, but it just gives black some sort of advantage in the sense that you have a potentially strong bishop that can't be, there's no counterpart for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess let's say knight h5. So then Hikaru has some options here. He can leave his pawn there, which I don't like too much because there's no reason to double his pawns. And also, if he moves his bishop, then the knight looks a little bit funny left on the rim there. So he can play either bishop d6 or bishop e5. Bishop d6 looks really tempting because if Dubov takes, then he is helping Hikaru get his rook more activated and double on the d-file.
Yeah, he's certainly improving white's rook and the opportunity to double, but this knight on h5 may come into f4. And with the queen on b7 and the knight on f4 staring down at the white king side, at least that gives black some kind of attacking chances. And I think the white should be okay. White's not going to get checkmated, but you just have to keep an eye out on things like this.
Yeah, and we actually saw knight e4 instead, so I guess we can go back to the original board. So knight e4 played right here. Similar idea, except for the fact that the knight isn't on the rim. So probably an improvement to my original suggestion here.
Knight e4, it does put the knight in line with the white queen and rook. Not that I can move my knight out of the way. Anyway, there's nowhere. Good to go, and you'll take my bishop on g3 if I do move my knight. But, okay, knight f1 played. So he's just immediately attacking this knight on e4. And black can take on g3 and try to play with that bishop that you just removed from white. So like knight takes g3. I don't know. I think take with the knight back on g3. Black has to play a5, b4. Try to play on the queen side with your. You have one fewer pawn on that side of the board, but at the very least you're kind of making progress, trying to create a weakness in white's position because the pawn on b2 is protecting both pawns. But if you can create an attack on the base pawn, then black has some chances.
Well, Hikaru has played this extremely solidly. I don't see how Dubov is going to create some type of threats on the base pawn in the near future. The plan, you pointed out, is going to take a little bit of time. And Hikaru now has the two knights, and the two knights would like to be more in the center because that's where they have the most control. So knight e5 looks super tempting, although I guess Dubov can then play knight c4 and try to offer up the knight exchange. And
your idea is that after if I take you on c4, you'll take with the b pawn, or will you take with the rook?
Honestly, both look pretty good. I like taking with the b pawn because it puts pressure on b2, but that also creates a weakness. So he'd have to decide what to go for there because rook takes c4 also looks pretty decent, and then he's trading off his more passive knight for white's more active knight.
Yeah, and you can play it for those A5, B4 type ideas just to very quickly break open the queen side, whereas the 4-on-3 for white looks very safe and sound. Sorry, for black, excuse me, with the extra pawn on the E6 square on that side of the board.
Definitely. And chat, can we give some mod love emotes in the chat? Because at the end of the day, the mods are volunteering and working harder than even Robert and I to keep this community afloat. And the memes are fun, and we all love the memes, but maybe mix up the memes with a little bit of love as well. 95 played, so this is what we predicted here. And rook e d8.
Oh,
okay.
You see the evaluation bar went up, so I thought that knight takes f7 has to be the move because the bar went up to like 1 point something, and as soon as you see that, you're like, wait a second, there's a tactic, but then it went back down. So probably first thought knight takes f7 would be good, and then realized, wait a sec, maybe not so good.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that bar evaluation, but that does make sense. Okay, so yeah, knight takes f7 does look a little bit scary because king takes f7, queen takes e6. I mean, Hikaru actually has some nice kingside attack threats now. Of course, he does need to be a little bit careful to not go wild and just sacrifice everything. Let's see. Rook takes d1 is an option, but there's no reason to give Hikaru the open file. If it were Hikaru's turn here, could he take on f7 now?
I think so. And so knight h5 is just like amping up the pressure on the king. And there's queen g4 ideas. There's knight takes f7. I mean, it's looking pretty scary over here for Dubov. So a move like bishop to f8, just protecting g7 in advance, looks good. Maybe you can trade rooks, as you were saying, trade on d1, but then you're giving control over the d file.
Right, and yeah, the reason for trading rooks that I thought of originally was just to get the rook off of e1 so that queen takes e6 doesn't work after, but then, of course, it also creates another advantage for white.
That's right. So...
Bishop f8 seems like a really safe, cozy style move, and it also protects the f7 pawn with the queen. I'm not sure, maybe you had already mentioned that.
No, bishop f8, I mentioned it as a good move, but it's good to reinforce that because we're looking at other options. We're saying, all right, it's looking kind of dangerous for black if you're not careful. But there are knight sacrifices f7 or g7. So bishop f8 just protects the pawn g7, but it does leave the f6 square a little looser. And that seems unimportant because there's a pawn g7 protecting it. But I'm looking after bishop f8, some kind of queen g4, where maybe I'll have a timely knight f6 check, which puts the king in the corner, and just it's a threat. It's not necessarily a winning threat, but it's just something I'm looking at as a potential attack there.
Right, and I do like that idea a lot. And it seems, I think this is one of those positions that seems a lot more intimidating to defend as a human versus as a computer. I think king safety is so overvalued when you play as people versus computers who can just, calculate everything and see, oh, even if my king is unsafe, it doesn't matter because insert precise line here.
Yeah, so we get scared about things. The engine just says, come on, there's nothing there.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So I think that's why our instinct, Alexandra and I both are kind of like, we need to put our bishop on f8. And maybe the engine's saying, yeah, I don't need to do that just yet. My bishop's fine where it is. I have some useful move like knight to d5 or something there. But knight d5, I'm looking immediately at knight takes f7, right? I don't even have to think twice about it and play a move like knight takes f7, and it feels like I'm going for a checkmate.
All right. Well, the rooks were traded. So as we said, what Dubov tried to do is remove the pressure from his e6 square. And even though it looks blocked, it won't be after knight takes f7 sacrifices. So he traded off now, and he still wants to defend his king a little bit more. And I wonder how he's going to do that.
So knight d5 is one option, but then I see queen f3 as a potential response, pinning the knight on d5 to the queen on b7.
Mm-hmm.
There's also queen g4 type ideas with knight takes f7. Like even actually knight d5, maybe knight takes f7 right away. And the reason why is you go king takes f7, otherwise you've given me a free pawn. I have queen to g4, hitting g7, hitting e6, and I see the engine now is going up and down, like better for black. Then it's it's lessening.
The engine is having some trouble deciding. I mean, again, this still looks very scary. Maybe the engine is finding some way to defend the position. And taking a peek here at the engine, the engine likes bishop f6 in this position. So it seems like he thinks he'll be able to hold after queen takes e6, king f8. But then he's also calculating ideas with queen d6 after.
Yeah, so I can understand why this is something then just, oh, you're up a piece for 2 pawns. That's it, right? It's just going pure calculation. For a human to have this position with queen g4 and thinking about all the options. So
So uncomfortable.
oh, you don't like having your king feel like it's about to get checkmated. Even if it doesn't, it just feels really unsafe. So queen takes d1 played by Hikaru and no response yet by Dubov. And he's trying to figure out the last thing he wants. He'd rather lose the game than allow a quick knight takes f7 or knight takes g7 that forces a draw. Because if it is a draw, this mini match is over. Hikaru wins, so he needs to prolong the game. He does play knight to d5. I'm still looking at some of these sacrifices. I believe in one of them.
Okay, so knight d5 played, as you suggested. Knight takes f7 is the line we are looking at that the computer doesn't like, but that we think is quite tricky for black to defend. And if Hikaru just wants to play it a little bit safe, because if he's not sure if knight takes f7 works, there's no reason to force it because a draw is a win. He has draw odds here. So he might as well just continue with queen g4, which is also intimidating, but much less risky.
Yeah, queen g4 is the sensible move. You're up a point, just need a draw. Let's play queen g4. Why sacrifice pieces? Go for the mate on g7. Black can play a move like bishop f6 or bishop f8 to protect the mate. But especially in the case of bishop f6, I take you take back. We're just trading so many pieces now where white's losing chances seem to be diminishing. And that's a good thing for Hikaru and a horrible thing for Dubov. Dubov needs to play these positions where he may lose the game, and that's fine as long as he has chances to win the game. Because without winning chances, he might as well, just give up the match. So he just needs to do something at some point.
Right. And yeah, in terms of do something, I guess what he has to first do is fend off the attack, and then he can go for a trickier plan.
Right. And I just turned my head, Alexandra. There's over 44,000 people watching
Oh my
in Hikaru's
gosh.
channel right now. So shout out to all of you.
Shout out to you guys.
Hit us with your yeps, your 5 heads, your pog use. There we go. I see it all coming. Look what I've done.
There you go, chat. Robert is happy that you are here. You are making Robert happy. So what else could you ask for? You're also supporting Hikaru, who has been just putting on amazing streams lately and having a huge boost for the chess community. Thanks so much to everyone for being here. We appreciate you guys. And also, Robert's Instagram, rhes91. Can we get it to 3,000?
Oh my gosh, this is not what I expected my day doing, was preventing you.
2,631, you guys. We're so close. We're going to have tripled Robert's following.
Oh, don't do this to me.
Just need you, chat.
Don't do this to me. No. Wait, bishop g5 was played. So is Dubov trying to have some kind of h4 move happen? And that kicks the bishop and threatens the g7 square. So maybe I can do this in a different order of knight takes g7 first. But I'm looking at these kind of ideas for Hikaru, because bishop g5 is clearly the type of risky move that Dubov felt he needed to play. But after knight takes g7, king g7, I have h4. This bishop is pinned. Your king is in a dangerous spot.
But I guess what he likes about this is it gives Hikaru some chance to misstep.
Right, that's very true.
He probably won't, but
actually,
some chance.
After h4, there's knight f6, which tries to kick the queen out from the pin of the bishop. And if you play queen g3, then there's knight to e4. And I think, no, then I have queen f3, don't I? Which attacks your knight. So, no, this looks like everything should be fine for white. I was thinking of queen g4, there's f5, and that was what I was worried about. Hitting the queen on g4, protecting the knight on e4. I was like, okay, that's a bad thing. But even there's queen h5, queen coming to g6, and I don't see how Dubov can win a game like this unless Hikaru makes a big blunder.
Yeah, that's quite fair. And I guess Hikaru's perspective, do you think he'd be at all, timid to play a move like knight takes g7 and just prefer something a little bit more, safe and sound here, like just even moving his queen over and not doing anything?
I think he'll take on g7. And
We did it, you guys! We got Robert to 3,000 on Instagram. Oh, I love it. Robert, you got to start posting more often. Sorry, buddy. The people have decided. We got a 3K Andy. Robert Hess, rhes91, taking over on Instagram. 2020 is the year of Robert on the gram. Yes. Sorry.
Oh gosh, I woke up today, had a good night of sleep, was ready to host the show with you, excited for the chess, the final of Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. I'm here, and then you're doing this to me. The thing is, if I, shout out your social media, that's just a good thing. You're happy about that.
Yeah, exactly. No, so you can't shout it out because then it's going to look like I'm just fishing for you to shout out mine by shouting out yours. So please don't do it because then it's going to make me look bad. And that's not what I'm trying to do here.
So I shouldn't talk about your Miss Botez Instagram.
Rob, stop it. No, seriously.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
So,
Right.
well, now I need to figure out what to do. Like, I feel lost. I feel like you just made my little teeny Instagram account into something that everybody is following, and then that. Oh,
I love it, Robert. I love it. But it's only because you genuinely don't care about Instagram. So that's why I find it so funny. I mean, you not only don't care about it, it probably would feel like a chore for you to do anything on it.
Don't tell Mark Zuckerberg that, okay?
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so bishop f6 played. Oh, so Hikaru didn't take on g7. He pushed h4. Okay, wait. Knight takes a... Oh, knight. Sorry, for a second I thought it was a free piece, but he can take back with the knight. My bad.
You're all
I got
good.
excited.
But you predicted that Hikaru would not sacrifice the knight. It was getting really complex, and unless you can figure out that line to like its exact conclusion of it, there's a forced draw or we're trading into a rook end game with the same amount of pawns, there was no reason to sacrifice that knight. I think it was good. Probably I was just going with my gut that it has to be good, but what he did is definitely smarter. I'm going to play h4, kick the bishop back. I can just take here and continue going into a position where with even material, both sides with a queen, a rook, some minor pieces, and he plays knight to d3. Now there's some ideas with knight to b4, knight to f4, trying to kick this knight from d5 to get the bishop on f6.
Yeah, I do like those plans. Although I thought that trading off would have simplified it a little bit more. And I guess I just keep thinking about these draws, but that's actually the wrong strategy because if Hikaru thinks about that, then he might start playing less accurate moves. So good for him to keep the knights on the board. The knights do cooperate a lot better than a knight and a bishop often. Putting the knight on b4 I like a lot because if knight takes b4, I guess you take with the a pawn so that you don't open up the c file. And even though you have two doubled pawns, they're actually protecting each other with like kind of a weird disformed pawn chain, but there's still a pawn chain, you know?
A chain is a chain, even if there's some double pawns there. And I just wanted to, I see a comment there by Shism. It's so weird. I never really cared about chess, but 3 days ago, these two casters and Mr. Nakamura just made it so interesting that I'm watching every time one is online. Thank you for making chess interesting, you cool people. First of all, being cool, especially
Okay.
after you call me nerdy all the time, that's awesome. But
That's
really,
such a sweet message,
it's
honestly.
so sweet. It's so great to
Aw.
hear that.
So cute. Okay. So knight b4 played.
Hoping for the trade. Hikaru would love that. The a takes. Oof, can't draw my arrow.
Chat, you angered the mods and now staff is here for you. I hope you know. They're coming for you, chat. Quick, behave. Thumbs up in the chat. Talk about how this is good for chess. Nothing to see here, folks.
And also part of this is I see someone just give a shout out to Mr. Llama because that's how that user was introduced to chess, and that's so great to see. All these Twitch streamers who are typically play other games are starting to play chess and helping to grow the game. So obviously there are many people involved here, and it's really every time I talk about it, it makes me very happy because it's so nice to see chess growing. And of course we eventually have like next week in 5 days. When does that start? The PogChamps tournament?
Yes,
Oof.
that's going to be wild. We're going to be seeing streamers play chess. And it's always weird to me when I hear us talk about how chess is growing because it's already one of the most popular games in the world where like over 70% of adults have tried it at one point. And you can't say that about a lot of video games. So it's something where some base knowledge, some base interest is there, but it never really made it to an online format or to a big audience. And of course, it's such a complicated game to start liking. But the fact that we're seeing this is both a surprise, honestly, but it also makes some sense.
It does,
Anyway.
for sure. And with this position, g6 played. hitting this knight on h5, but the queen pins the pawn on g6 to the king, so you're not capturing the knight. What are you laughing about?
No, somebody sent a funny message.
You want to mention it? Because now I feel like I'm
Well,
left
it's gonna
out.
make me sound like I'm 12 years old. No, okay. Let's keep focusing. Let's keep focusing.
Okay, well, on that note, I was trying to make a chess point, and then I wanted to hear the joke, and I wasn't going to mute you this time, but...
Okay, I'm trying to focus on chess commentary. I'm giving stats about chess, and I get a message saying same percentage of people have an STD too. And I'm supposed to not laugh. I don't have the maturity for that, okay? Okay. Moving on.
I should have muted you. I really should
You
have
should
done
have muted me. You should have muted me.
This... Oh, gosh.
Two things that are equally popular. Anyway, I'm sorry. So this position looks pretty equal.
So what Hikaru has done is he's traded his knight for Dubov's bishop, but you mentioned this before. There may be double pawns on the queen side, but they're well defended because it is a pawn chain, and there's a pawn chain on the king side from f2 to h4. So all of white's pawns are safe and sound. The base pawns, b2, f2, really not possible to apply pressure on those squares, whereas rook a1 hits the a6 pawn right away. So that pawn a6 is the one that can become a target.
And g5 played by Dubov because he's pushing, so he wouldn't have to do that, but he's trying to remove some of the pawns away from the white king side here, which does make sense. If he opens up the h file as well, he has some dreams of doubling up on the open h file.
Perhaps. And I just want to pause, and I know we're just started focusing on the chess again. Hikaru's his channel is #1 on all of Twitch. Just gonna throw that out there. How do you feel about that?
Oh my gosh, you guys! Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here. 45,000 people here for Hess, here for Hikaru, here for chess, here for Dubov, here for the community. Thank you guys so much. You were here. That
was the nice try. And thank you for being here for Alexandra Botez of Botez Live. Easy clap. Just easy clap for that.
Oh,
and
thanks, Robert.
Also, Forzin is also watching. Of course, there's my channel as well. So it seems like there's well over 60,000. Got to give a shout out to Forzin because as this game is getting closer and closer to wrapping up, I just want to, shout out, give some love to him.
Hasn't Forzin been watching every day? He's been replacing his camera with yours and I think trying to guess the moves or something like that.
Oh, well, if you're putting my camera there, you're not... Guessing the moves is going to be difficult. Just a big distraction in the worst way.
Well, thank you so much for watching, Forzin. We appreciate it. Okay, so g4 played here, and what Dubov is trying to do is he's trying to take away the escape squares from the white king. So the less squares the king has, the more likely you are to try to create some type of tactics here. And even if, however, yeah, you're shutting him out on the stream. That's awesome. There you go. There you go. Show some love there. Hello, Forzin. Now you're watching us watch you.
A little awkward there, isn't it?
Yeah. What's up? What's up? Okay. So queen e3, you cannot play queen h6, but even if you could before, there was always rook on h1. So Hikaru can always bring back the rook to the open file if he needs to defend, which is why the position is, still very even here. If anything, I'd say it's better for Hikaru because Hikaru's king is a little bit safer than the black king because the black king has pushed his pawn a little too forward.
But wouldn't you say that if this queen could go from f6 and jump over to a square like c6, then you're not feeling quite as good about the white king's position, right? Because the diagonal is quite open.
That's actually a great point. The reason why you feel more comfortable is because the queen cannot give any light squared checks. But let's say he tries to do something like that, queen e7. The problem is that his king is also in danger. So maybe a move like rook h1, and this is what's being played on the board, is the issue with that. If queen d5, king g1, then there's a perpetual with queen d1, but Dubov doesn't want to draw. However, he can't defend against moves like queen h6, which is the mate in 2.
That's why you have to give checks from Dubov's perspective here. You can bring your queen back to f6, but then you brought your queen f5 to be an aggressive piece, and now I'm forcing you back into a more defensive stance. And people going crazy. I don't know if you're seeing this, just like it's always happening. But
I'm seeing it, but I was already having trouble focusing every time I look at chat, so I've been trying to just keep it on the game.
Keeping it on the game. So queen d5. Don't bring your king to h2 because then you block your own rook on h1. The rook doesn't look useful when you put your king on h2. And not to mention that if you're completely careless and your king's on h2, if this black rook were able to get to the h file, then all of a sudden it's black who has the attack. So for now, Hikaru threatening queen h6 check. Only way to stop it is either by giving checks for black with queen d5, as we were mentioning, or retreating queen e4 check. That's a trade into an endgame. And I feel like that is a resignation, not in the sense of this game is going to be lost for black, but a resignation of the match. Like, you know what? There's nothing I could do here. Hikaru played such a solid game. And look at this, rook a1. You're going to go rook e2. You're going to go win my pawn on b2, but I'm going to win your pawn on a6, then win your pawn on b5. You're going to go win my pawn on c3. So we're seeing a massive amount of trades. And at the end of this, rook takes b5, rook g5 check, rook takes g4.
Well, we're going to see it simplify into a draw here. Yeah, just rook g5 check, as you said. And Hikaru did it. He's going to be winning 2.5 to 1.5. That means he will have won this mini match. They will be playing another one tomorrow where if Hikaru wins, they don't have to play the entire 3 because he's already won the best out of 3. And we do have a draw confirmed. Robert, I'm going to update the score.
I got it. Don't do it. I got it.
You did it. Okay. Thanks, Robert. So 2.5, 1.5 for Dubov. Chat. Huge congratulations to Hikaru. We usually get him on the stream for a post-game interview after, so you guys should hang on for that. And he also does game analysis afterwards, so you can see how he was actually thinking about the preparation and every specific move. First you saw it from our point of view, but now you're going to see it as well from his, which is just awesome. And the fact that he's doing it right after he plays the game, no break at all, ton of respect. And if you guys want to support him, I mean, you've already been here, and he really appreciates you guys, as he'll tell you when he is live.
Yes, indeed. And he now goes up 1 match to none, but he did lose his first match against Magnus Carlsen, and then he was the one who came back and won that semifinal. So, you know, Dubov still has a chance. He actually had a nice comeback within this match. He lost the first 2 games, and then he won game 3 in a really nice game. So it's clear that Dubov has the talent necessary to take on Hikaru Nakamura, but you got to give credit where it's due. Hikaru Nakamura came out with a very solid approach in game 1 and beat Dubov when Hikaru the black pieces. Then in the next game, Dubov played a bit of risky chess, got into an endgame that Dubov probably should have survived, but in time trouble, he was not able to hold the balance. And then after that, Dubov cut the deficit in half from 2 games to 1. And finally, in this last game, Hikaru with the white pieces, proving that you're not just going to win on command. You need to do everything possible, maybe get something crazy going on, and Hikaru would not allow that.
Yeah, Hikaru knows how to play solid chess as well as, you know, crazy attacking chess. And that's why he's just such a king of online blitz/rapid and even bullet chess.
And you know what Hikaru also knows how to do? So we have the Pog Champs coming up, brought to you by chess.com and Twitch from June 5th
Tell me more,
to
Robert.
19th. So that's going to be a ton of fun. And in that event, what's Hikaru doing? Well, he's hosting. So if you're watching right now on Hikaru's channel, he's going to be the host of this event alongside you. I know you're going to be coaching these players. You have already been coaching the players. And, of course, from chess.com, Danny Wrench will be joining. And we have so many great players as part of this. As we mentioned, Forzen is taking part. Extremely popular variety streamer who's been watching this chess. So that's been really cool to see him following Hikaru's progress. We have Voyboy, who some will say is kind of the favorite, no?
Yeah, he's very strong. He's about 1700 last time we checked. He used to play chess as a kid, actually. And I think with the training, he'll be even stronger. So he is definitely a heavy favorite from what I've seen so far, although other players like BoxBox have been making progress really quickly, playing chess almost every single day on the stream.
That's true. BoxBox it's been cool to see his progress, his thoughts. You know, he elucidates and says, well, this is what I'm thinking, this is why I'm thinking it. And he, you know, it's a work in progress, just like we all are as chess players. But I think he's doing a great job streaming it. Fusli she's been trying to improve as well. She's a popular variety streamer. She'll be getting her first real chess test once she's taking part in these Pog Champs. And, of course, there are many others, including Nate Hill, who you were coaching the other day.
Yeah, and Nate was really actually impressive with his chess principles. It seemed like he had studied before we even took our lesson, so definitely a good student.
Well, many other great players, great streamers taking part in this. and they're all trying to learn chess, improve, and they're having a lot of fun with it. I'm having a lot of fun tuning into their streams, and well, you're coaching them, so hopefully you're enjoying that process as well.
I've really enjoyed the coaching so far. Coaching is really relaxing. It kind of reminds me of commentary, because when you're playing your own games, it's a little bit more stressful. Of course, it's also fun, but when you're teaching someone, you kind of get to remember that joy of when you were a new player. And this was a quote that I said on my channel that my dad told me that some world champion had said. A beginner feels as much joy when they fork their opponent's king and rook as a world champion when he discovers a novelty against another player, insinuating that basically you can enjoy the game at all levels, and even though as it gets more complicated, you still really like it. You get that as a beginner as well.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. And I'm going to do something for the crowd. Normally, I'm not that type of guy, but for everybody, they want the wooden shield. They want the ice skater. They want the man who, is a huge success at other games and is really becoming one of the faces of chess. Who is that? Come on. XQC.
There you go.
Now the people are happy. They're going to go crazy. And that means we can go back to talking about what we were talking about, which I don't remember what it was at this point.
I'm just sharing the Zoom call so that we can get Hikaru on soon.
Oh.
I'm guessing I can just share your link and it should work.
Yeah, well, give me a heads up for when he's going to be joining, because,
Yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I do.
That way I can, hide everything and no scuff broadcast here.
Yeah, you've been killing it, Robert. You're much more professional at managing the OBS than I am.
Nah.
Oh, man. So can you remind chat what's at stake for if Hikaru does win tomorrow so that people know what to tune in for? Because these are the finals, you guys. And if Hikaru wins tomorrow, he's won the Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge in 2020.
That's true. So what's at stake tomorrow? Are you talking about in terms of money, in terms of what are we going for?
In terms of everything, not just that, but also the significance of him winning this event, since you seem to have a strong opinion about that.
Well, it's part of a broader chess tour, right? So there was the Magnus Carlsen Invitational, there's this Lindores Abbey Rapid Challenge. I'm not sure what the names of the others are, but I know they're coming up in a few weeks from now. So it's part of a broader tour. The top finishers will play then in a knockout event. So because of that, you're not just winning prize money per stage, you're qualifying for something where Magnus Carlsen will be back. Hikaru Nakamura for sure will be qualifying there. Maybe an Alireza Firouzja or an Nishikori or Fabiano Caruana, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. All of these top chess players will take part in that, and winning an event like that has huge significance. And of course, right now Hikaru is certainly making his presence felt. But some of these other top players would like to challenge for that throne.
Absolutely. So I cannot wait for that matchup tomorrow. Hopefully Dubov is able to recover a little bit from today. He'll go tomorrow feeling somewhat of a fresh start. Tomorrow Hikaru is going to start off with the white pieces. That means that if Dubov gets a draw in the first game, he'll be pretty happy with that. But if Hikaru is able to win with the white pieces the first game, then we might see somewhat of a similar situation here where it's just too hard to mentally recover from this.
Yep. And you heard what I said? I'm waiting for it. I'm just looking at the chat.
Of course.
Where is it? There it is. I knew what I was starting.
Aw, chat. We got Robert, who's just predicting what you guys are going to do here.
Just, I'm making it happen.
Oh, man. Okay, well, chat, we're excited to see Hikaru coming back here soon.
It
was actually impressive that Dubov was able to win the third game after losing twice. I just want to give him some credit for that, because that is a difficult game to play. So he must have felt a little bit better. At least he recovered. If he had lost something like 3-0 today or 2.5 to just a half, he would have felt a little bit more intimidated, I think, going into tomorrow.
That's true. You get that victory, you know that you can beat this opponent in any given game. So at least getting that taste of victory, it gives you confidence as you go into tomorrow. But Hikaru lost 3-0 in that first match against Magnus. He went all in that third game. It didn't work out. And so he didn't win a single game there, and yet still beat Magnus in the match, I'm always like hesitant, I would say, to think about just how important a single game is in a match that you lost, because different players have different results. But I ultimately do think that it is good for Dubov to prove that he could outplay Hikaru, because the first 2 games he certainly was the one who was outplayed.
Yeah, and I think he's proving it to us, but he's also reminding himself. And just going back before these 3 games, the head-to-head in their rapid/blitz was Hikaru had 4 wins, Dubov had won once, and they had 4 draws. So that was out of their 10 games. So Hikaru was already leading the head-to-head going into this, and he is still leading with an even slightly larger lead. So I do think it's hard to play someone who you have a bad history with.
And most players have a rough record against Hikaru Nakamura, so it's not just Daniil Dubov, it's pretty much anybody in online chess, with the exception of Magnus Carlsen and maybe a couple others who can go toe-to-toe with Hikaru. Everybody else, it's a lopsided matchup.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for him, you guys. He's coming soon.
He's coming
and
soon.
Robert, are you still doing commentary on the Clutch Championship later today? Or
The Clutch Championship is done.
It's done. Okay.
Yeah, but there's another one coming up that I saw starting June 6th, so I will be doing that coverage myself.
Yeah, so if you guys want to watch more of Robert's coverage, he's on twitch.tv/GMHess, and he's one of my favorite commentators. Obviously, he's an extremely talented chess player. He explains things fantastically, so
Thank you.
another shout out for you guys there.
And Alexandra is one of my favorite artists, which is why I've kept this drawing that she's
Yes,
done.
please show that artwork. I bet you could sell it on eBay and get quite a fancy price for it. Okay, Robert.
I'm just showing it there, just making sure that
Yes,
for those
chat,
people who
I drew that. I know. You think, wow, how can this girl be so talented to draw something like that? I don't know, chat. I don't know. It's the same person. It looks like a photograph.
I think it's excellent. Except I need to grow the beard back.
Yeah, he had a beard back in the day, and it was a little scruffy. Okay.
Scruffy, is that a compliment or an insult?
It's just an objective term.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Objective term.
Oh man.
So now that I put that drawing back, I'll need to remember what page I was on, which that was my fault for grabbing my bookmark, which is the drawing of me. Gosh.
Chat, while we wait, because we are waiting for Hikaru, he is doing first his interview on Chess24. rhess91, his Instagram has 3,455 followers. He started under 1,000. We're very close to 4xing his Instagram. So I think Robert is actually going to transition to being an Instagram model after his commentary. Very excited to see that trajectory.
I was so happy with so few people.
GM Hess.
What?
Sorry, rhess91. rhess91.
I was so happy just having, my friends follow, and then you're letting the account out of the bag, and now everybody's gonna follow, and now maybe I have to close my account.
Your account is so wholesome. You got tennis, food, travel pictures. Life is like a game of chess. I don't know how to play chess. Gelato photos.
Yeah.
It's just such a wholesome account.
That place, I just happened to be walking by it, and I saw that sign, and I was like, okay, I gotta take a photo of that. I had no choice.
Aw. Okay, guys, I'll stop trolling Robert with that. I think I've gone far enough, but we were just so close to 4xing that I couldn't help it, and we were also just patiently waiting here. Robert, what's the next event you're most looking forward to other than the match tomorrow?
Also, I'm getting texts from my friend Regina. Shout out to you, Regina, for watching. She goes, ha 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 ha, Alexandra going in on your Instagram account, all caps.
Exactly, because people who know you would probably find that even more funny with your personality.
So, yes, they are finding it funny. Now they probably are. They are finding it funny. Now I have a second text, so... look what you've done.
Oh, man. You know what I would love to see? we're doing Rapid and we're doing Blitz. I'd love to see a Super GM Bullet Championship, and not just because I'm addicted to that time format. For those of you who aren't familiar, Bullet is 1 minute chess. So you both have only 1 minute for the entire game. So the games move really quickly. It's very high energy. There's a lot of mistakes. There's super GMs flagging each other, making themselves run out of time, and it's just so exciting. So exciting.
It is pretty awesome. And I was actually about to offer just play a game of Bullet just while we waited, but I was like, nah, shouldn't do that.
Yeah, Robert. Let's
No.
see you play Bullet.
No, too much pressure. There's so many people watching. And what if I play somebody who beats me and then I look bad?
You know what? If you play somebody who beats you, then you just admit that, you're human too, and you're playing someone your level. So getting one loss is not the end of the world.
Now, of course, everybody that I say it out loud is like, do it! Do it! You have no autonomy. You can't make this decision for yourself. We're going to peer pressure you into it. Do it!
And Robert doesn't get peer pressure, Chad. Unfortunately, he's immune, so nice try.
Yeah. I mean... But, there might be, speaking of Bullet, I'm not sure. I don't know how much I can say here, but there might be a pretty big Bullet event coming up later this year. Maybe
Really? A Bullet event?
Maybe a Bullet World Championship? I don't know. You didn't hear it from me.
Oh my god, I would die happy. I would love to see a Bullet Championship. I love it so much. I don't know if it's happening, but that's just my dream.
I'm pretty sure there's a legit Bullet World Championship in the works. I don't know any details. I just hear rumors. You listen closely. Bullet.
Oh, I'm going to be training my Bullet. I mean, I'm never going to make it, but it's just going to inspire me to get better at Bullet.
It's the most excited I've been about Bullet since I watched the show The Killing, and there's a character named Bullet, and the character's awesome. So,
cool story, Robert, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks. I appreciate you making fun of me. Oh, gosh, it hurts. Hey, see, I get a great show. Thank you,
No,
Barnesy97.
I'm glad. Oh, man. Oh, I think Robert has already seen the DBZ clip, you guys. Have you, Robert?
What's DBZ stand for?
Did you see the remake of Dragon Ball Z with your... Have you not seen it?
Wait, is it the one of freshman at PogU video?
No. I'm sending it to you. We gotta react.
Okay, well, now
Okay.
now this is a lot going on here. Where'd you send? You send it to me?
Yeah, hang on. I need to pull it up. Where is it? Oh, I found it. Oh, no,
Oh.
I found Hikaru's version of it.
Okay. How did I get... So people are memeing me now?
I guess I could send you the Hikaru version of it.
Well, you just
Yeah,
mixed the one I'm
you're-
in, so I want to see the one that I'm in.
No, you're in it, but this is Hikaru reacting. You're gonna react to Hikaru reacting to the video on Hikaru's channel. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm sending it to you. Oh, thanks, Dad. Okay. My dad, wow, my dad already knows, and he just linked the original video.
Really?
Dude, my dad has been addicted to Twitch lately. I'm not even just saying that. Okay, here, I linked you the video in Slack. I love how Papa Botas already knows. Oh, wait, Hikaru's coming. coming.
All right,
Never mind.
let's have Hikaru come on first. So we're going to take a quick break while we just get Hikaru on. We'll interview him, and then I can watch whatever video this is about me. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be back in a sec. And we are back with the man who just won his first mini match against Daniil Dubov, Hikaru. Congrats, another fine victory.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was pretty smooth today for the most part, so I'm just very happy to get one victory under my belt. Still another one needed, but it's certainly the start that I wanted.
And
you're still staying very level-headed as... Sorry, Robert.
No, go ahead.
You're still staying very level-headed even after winning this. When you win a match, does that change how you think of going into the next one?
No, I mean, I think the most important thing is to realize it's not over. Obviously, winning this first match means I'm one away from winning the whole event. But I think if you start looking too far ahead, there's nothing good that can come out of that, only bad stuff, because you start thinking about like how great it would be to win, and your thoughts and your brain just starts getting jumbled up. So I think that's the main reason I'm just like, I take it one win at a time and just keep focusing on the next match. Obviously, if I were to win tomorrow or the next day, I think I would have a slightly different reaction, but still, there's a lot of chess to be played. Potentially, there could be another 10 games, so it's very far from over.
Yeah, and you said you got off to a good start by winning this match here. But speaking of getting off to a good start, you won the first game of this match with Black. I mean, what was kind of going through your mind throughout the game? Were you just playing at first to neutralize any sort of advantage he may get with the white pieces, and then you found your opportunity and he went for this knight c6 move, which kind of turned the game into your favor?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say in general is I wanted to be solid. I knew that Daniil would play something interesting, something creative to try and surprise me in the first game with white, and I felt that if I was very solid, and I tried to play something a bit on the drier side, something that wasn't super complicated or very interesting, I might get some chances to probably be a little bit frustrated at the lack of getting an advantage. However, he did get some kind of advantage out of the opening of this game. I thought the way he played was pretty normal. It was nice. And then this b5 move I thought was really the critical point of the game, and possibly even of the match, if we keep going.
Yep, I'm there.
Yeah. So I think this was really the critical point of this first match, because after he goes b5, a5, what happens is that Black's moves become very obvious, so that if white doesn't do anything on the next move, I just put a knight on c5, and then I just have this really nice outpost, whereas with the pawn on b4, I can't bring the knight or the bishop out. So I thought that this was a critical point, and Daniil, I felt, should have probably just gone for it with b5, a5, knight c6. I don't know if it actually works, but to me, it seemed like the only practical choice, because after that, if anything, you can even start to be a little bit worse as white in the resulting endgame. So I was surprised that he didn't follow it up with knight c6. So I thought this made the most sense. And then in the game, it still was probably balanced, I would say. If you go back a move.
Yep.
So b5, a5, knight a4, knight d5. I mean, all of this I think is very balanced. Trade, bishop f3, knight c5.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm following your. It's just there's the stream.
There's a delay. Yeah. No, that's fine. Okay. So yeah, and I mean, I basically thought that it's still very dry and it should be a draw. But if anyone's better, it's Black now. So the fact that Black could be better, I think, makes it feel very uncomfortable, because psychologically you feel like it's slipping away. And so Daniil played this knight c6 move, which I thought was completely correct. After he traded the knights, and then basically there was this one moment where he went queen b5. If you just keep going.
Yep. Queen b5. Got it.
Yeah, so I would say here, if white goes queen d4 instead of queen b5, the game is probably still going to be a draw. But after queen b5, d4, I think it's all just it's just bad news for white. And yeah, winning this first game, of course, was huge for the match, because I think, as I've said many times on the stream, when you start with Black, you want to be solid. But if you can actually win with Black in the first game, having two whites and one Black after that certainly gives you a big advantage. So I was very, very pleased to win this game, and I think it really only got better from there, because obviously Daniil was very, very unhappy. I think probably both with his play, but also just the whole match situation. And then I got this queen ending. Yeah, it was just very, very smooth.
And in the second game, when he played the Philidor defense, it seemed like he ended up having quite a cramped position right out of the opening. Can you speak a little bit about what you think of his choice to play it that way?
I mean, he's trying to be very creative and play something different. And I think one thing that's very important in chess, besides just playing good moves, is knowing the opponent that you're playing against. And Daniil likes to be creative. And again, my idea, even in the second game, was basically to not let him have any fun and just play very, very boring, very solid chess. And so I think it certainly worked very much in my favor, because the positions were not positions which allowed for a lot of creativity. You have to kind of find best moves or play moves that aren't super exciting. And even though, I mean, he should have drawn this game, the fact that it wasn't something that I think he enjoys playing certainly helped, because he made some blunders late in the middle game.
Well, there's also a disconnection in this game, right? We were kind of confused what was going on. So can you kind of give us the details of what happened and what was going through your mind? Because that can throw a player off.
What do you mean?
During this game, didn't something happen where the game was...
Yeah, so there was a disconnection. I think the server started lagging or something started going wrong. Like we both basically got disconnected for like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And then like we couldn't resume the game. So of course Nil's clock was running. So his clock went from like 9 minutes to 2 minutes. So yeah, we had to restart after about 5 minutes. And I think certainly it was not optimal for either of us. I think Daniil was obviously not in a great mood because of what happened in the first game. And then for me, riding the wave off of winning the first game, I really want to just keep going. So it kind of, I think it was unfortunate for both of us, but I kept my cool and didn't really do anything too crazy, and just kept playing good moves. So I think for both of us, we didn't like it, but it didn't really change the outcome of the game.
Yeah, and
Right.
then,
The only outcome that was a little bit different was in game 3 when Dubov managed to get a win. Did that make you nervous at all going into the 4th game after a really hot starting streak?
Yeah, I don't know about nervous. I was annoyed at myself because in this 3rd game, I should have actually made a draw at a certain point. All the 7s, nice. Yeah, I guess the thing is, out of the opening, I was probably a little bit worse, but then Daniil made like 1 or 2 inaccurate moves, like this bishop h5, bishop g4, bishop h5, I think was okay. But then when he put his bishop on e5 in the critical moment, was not the best move. And after that, I should have been able to draw the game pretty routinely, I think. Like he should have gone rook e5. I think after rook e5, white is much better. But when he put the bishop there instead, I have a feeling there's probably a simple way for black to equalize that I missed. So yeah, I was unhappy with this game, but luckily I'd won the first 2. So really, it was more important just to not get too annoyed and kind of focus because I had the white pieces in game 4.
Yeah, and then in game 4, you went for what seemed like a very safe strategy where you just wanted to give him all of nothing, and it kind of worked to perfection, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some people in chat, right? Can somebody call the no fun police? But yeah, I did the same thing. I basically decided I'm not gonna let him have any fun, anything creative, and played more boring dry chess. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I was ever in danger in this game. So it was a good solid 4th game.
Well, we're excited to see the final matchup. Well, not final, might be final matchup tomorrow between you and Dubov. We were talking a little bit about how this event compares to others. Can you talk about the significance for you if you were to win?
I don't know. Just it would be nice to win a tournament, get that first prize. In general, I think beating Magnus to me is really far more. I mean, it's far more of an achievement, I would say, because obviously Magnus has pretty much always gotten better of me when we've played. So beating Magnus certainly I think is very special. But again, it is a tournament, so I would like to win. But overall, it's not like there's some special significance to this tournament over, say, another tournament I've won. But for the Twitch fans, obviously I would like to win it. I know many of them have been following the whole event. It's been a very long event, so just going to try to bring it home tomorrow for them.
I was actually about to ask you, are you tired at this point? Because you're playing super grandmaster for super grandmaster. It's like the endless, onslaught of really tough opponents. So are you a bit tired?
Yeah, I think every day I'm tired. I'm tired. Then like I play the match. Hopefully it goes well. Then I go stream for a few hours. Let the adrenaline or coast with the adrenaline for a few hours, and like go eat, go to sleep, do it again every single day. So it certainly is a little bit tiring, but I think the fact there's so many people watching, so many people interested in chess, again, gives me that extra boost to keep going. And so far I found a way to play good chess up to this point.
Speaking of so many people watching, today you actually were the most watched stream on Twitch for a while. I think you were nearing 50,000 viewers. So huge congratulations to you and your community.
Oh wow! Today's one of the few days when like I was really focused. I wasn't actually looking in between games. I wasn't actually going out and checking the numbers. So yeah, it's just amazing to see so many people following chess again. The fact that people are rooting for me, just watching the game. It's incredible, and it's a great time for chess, and it's a great time great time for things that are online. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think it's fair. But Your community is still giving you all the love and support, and I believe you're probably gonna get a little bit of rest and then start streaming soon. So we don't want to take any more of your time. But Hikaru, thank you as always for joining us after the match, and best of skill tomorrow.
Yeah, best of skill.
I always say that. I always say it.
Best of skill, dude. Like, come on.
What do you mean? Come on.
You say best of luck. Best of skill.
Yeah, best of skill. We're talking about a very skilled game here. Why not?
I literally have never heard anyone ever say that in regards to like an upcoming game of chess. I literally have never heard someone say best of skill. But okay, whatever floats your boat, man. I've literally never heard that ever.
I've said
anyway,
it on many interviews and many broadcasts, but I guess next time I'll say best of luck to you instead.
Okay. I'll take it either way. I've never heard it. But anyway, yeah. But you guys are doing an amazing job, so keep up the good work with the coverage, and I'll see all you guys tomorrow, and people on the stream, I'll see you guys in like 15, 20 minutes.
All right. See you, Hikaru.
Bye, Hikaru.
See you guys.
Well, we're going to let Hikaru go. You can now learn what the wooden shield is. I already read this out loud, so I'm not going to do it once more. But Hikaru is so generous with his time there. Alexandra, he's never heard me say best of skill before.
Yeah, because I know you always like saying it because chess players like to say that there's no luck in chess. It's a game of perfect information. So I do see where you're coming with that. But Robert, do you mind reacting to the video we sent you? You are in it, and chat wants to see it before we go off.
Let me do that because I know that means Hikaru is also going to be streaming. What is going on? You're invisible. Like I honestly have your cam, and you're not there.
I'm here, Robert. Just follow my voice.
I'm following. Oh, there you are. There you are. Okay. I was very confused. I was like, I actually have your cam where I had it before, but you were gone. What if I just instead of 5-head you, 10-head you here?
Do it, Robert. Do it.
No, you won't be happy about that. Come on, let's be real.
Yeah, let's maybe make my head proportional.
I think we should 10-head you. I really almost did it, and then I was like, oh, I thought better of it.
Okay, chat. Well, we're about to see Robert do a react Andy, react Robert, at it again, chat. Let's see what he thinks of this. And you guys, if you guys haven't seen the video yet, it's honestly hilarious. So stay tuned for that. And then shortly after, we will switch with Hikaru, who will come on and do some game analysis.